I am Chloe Vance, 30 years old, and my family has always seen me as the failure. At my sister Bianca's lavish wedding, she sat me at a single table, behind a 2-ton marble pillar. I was invisible. My mother just smirked. "Don't worry, Chloe. No one will even know you're here." She was right. Until the most powerful man in the room, a man my father worships, walked straight past their head table, sat down next to me and said, "Chloe Vance, I've been looking everywhere for you. We need to talk about your 8-figure valuation." I just smiled as I watched my sister's face collapse. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the family secret only to become their biggest success. My name is Chloe Vance. I am 30 years old, and today is my sister Bianca's wedding. I should be happy for her. That's what normal sisters feel. But as I stand at the entrance to the main ballroom at the Four Seasons Atlanta, the only thing I feel is a cold, familiar dread. The kind that settles in your stomach when you know you are walking into an ambush dressed in silk and peonies. I did not want to come. I told my mother I was busy with work at the university archive. That is where I work. I am a historian archivist, a fancy title for what my family calls playing with dusty old books. To them, it is not a real job. It does not pay 6 figures. It does not come with stock options. It is not impressive. In the Vance family, if it is not impressive, it does not exist. My father, James Vance, built his real estate empire, Vance Properties, from the ground up. He is new money Atlanta, and he is obsessed with proving he belongs. My mother, Denise, is his chief lieutenant in this war for social status. Their strategy is simple: acquire, display, and conquer. Their greatest acquisition, my sister Bianca. Bianca is 32. She is beautiful, she is ruthless, and she has always been their golden child. She did everything right. Went to Spelman, got an MBA from Emory, and works in marketing for a luxury brand. She is the perfect accessory to their perfect life. And me, I am the problem. I am the quiet one who went to the state university, the one who prefers libraries to parties, the one who at 30 is still single and working a charity job, as my father calls it. I am the smudge on their perfect family portrait. So why am I here? Because if I did not come, it would give them another weapon to use against me. Chloe is so bitter. Chloe is just jealous. She can't even show up for her own sister. Sometimes showing up is the only way to silence them. So I stand here smoothing down the simple navy blue dress I bought at Ann Taylor. It is clean, it is appropriate, and I already know it is going to be the first thing they attack. The ballroom is breathtaking and horrifying. My mother has outdone herself. The theme is winter white. Tens of thousands of white peonies and roses are everywhere, draped over arches spilling from massive centerpieces. The chandeliers are dripping with crystals. A string quartet is playing in the corner. This is not a wedding. It is a coronation. A display of wealth so loud it is deafening. I see them immediately holding court near the entrance. My father, James, is in a custom tuxedo, laughing loudly, his voice booming across the room as he shakes hands with some politician. My mother, Denise, is beside him, dripping in diamonds that catch the light. She looks radiant and stressed. She is scanning the room, not for guests, but for flaws. Then I see Bianca. She is a vision in her custom Vera Wang gown. She is surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them laughing, all of them looking like they just stepped out of a magazine. And then I see them. The Harringtons. Spencer Harrington, the groom, stands next to Bianca. He is handsome in that classic sharp-featured New England way. He is white. And his family, they are old money. The kind of Mayflower old money that my father both idolizes and resents. The Harringtons stand in a tight, separate circle. Spencer's mother, a terrifyingly thin woman in a stiff gray dress, is looking at the floral arrangements as if they smell bad. His father is checking his watch. They are not impressed. They are enduring. This is not a merger of equals. This is my father buying his way into a lineage that will never truly accept him. And Bianca is the price. I take a deep breath, clutching my small purse. The dread is replaced by a strange cold pity. They are all performing. Every single one of them. I finally move, stepping from the shadow of the doorway into the bright, judgmental light of the reception hall. I walked forward, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. The string quartet was playing something by Vivaldi, but it just sounded like scraping to me. My family's cluster was loud, a tight knot of self-congratulation. As I got closer, I could hear my mother Denise clasping her hands together as she stared at my sister. "Oh, Bianca, just look at you." My mother's voice was high with an awe she never used for me. "That custom Vera Wang, it is not just a dress, it is a piece of art. You are a queen, an absolute queen." Bianca. My sister preened. She did look stunning. The dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk clinging to her in a way that screamed expensive. She touched her perfectly styled hair. "It's nice, isn't it, Vera?" and I just clicked creatively. My father James clapped his hand on the groom's shoulder. "Spencer Harrington, his prized son-in-law. Spencer, my boy, your family has been so generous. This partnership is just the beginning, the very beginning." Spencer, who looked like he was carved from expensive soap, gave a tight smile. "We are all very excited, James. This union is important to all of us." Then, as if they had rehearsed it, they all turned to me. The music seemed to fade. The laughter from the other guests went distant. I was in the spotlight. My simple navy dress, the one I had thought was elegant and understated, now felt like a potato sack. My mother's eyes traveled from my shoes up to my hair, and her smile faltered, replaced by a tiny, almost invisible frown. "Oh, Chloe," she said. The warmth from her voice seconds ago was gone, replaced by a polite, brittle chill. You made it. We were wondering." I forced a smile. "Of course, Mom, I wouldn't miss it." "That dress?" she said, gesturing vaguely at me. "Is that Macy's? How practical?" A small, sharp laugh escaped Bianca, a laugh I had heard my entire life, usually aimed at me. "You surprised Mom, Chloe. Really, you should have worked with Ashley. You know, my wedding coordinator, I told her about you. She said she could have found you a nice corner somewhere. Suitable. So you wouldn't be overwhelmed." My hand tightened on my clutch. The smooth leather was the only thing keeping me grounded. A suitable corner. Like a piece of furniture that did not match the rest of the room. Spencer looked me up and down, a slow, dismissive appraisal. His gaze lingered for a second on my dress, and I saw a flicker of distaste. He did not even bother to hide it. He leaned in toward Bianca, not even trying to lower his voice. "Bianca, darling," he said, his voice a smooth East Coast drawl. "This is—" He did not finish. He did not have to. "This is what? The help. The poor relation." Bianca waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "Ah, this is just my sister Chloe. I told you about her." She turned her brilliant, cold smile on me. "Spencer, this is Chloe. She's the one who works at the university, you know, doing something with old books." The chill I felt was no longer from the air conditioning. It was from them. The unified front of my mother's disappointment, my sister's contempt, and my new brother-in-law's complete indifference. They had looked at me, and in less than 30 seconds told me exactly what I was worth to them. Nothing. I was a social embarrassment, a financial liability, a practical girl in a Macy's dress who played with old books. I kept the smile plastered on my face. It felt stiff, like a mask cracking at the edges. "It's lovely to see you all too," I said. "Congratulations." They had already turned away, back to the real guests, back to the world where they belonged, and I did not. Before I could even process the combined dismissal from my family, a woman with a sharp blonde bob and a tighter smile appeared at my elbow. She was holding an iPad like a weapon, her headset mic already in place. This had to be Ashley, the wedding coordinator Bianca had mentioned. She was in her 30s, efficient, and radiated the kind of brittle energy that comes from dealing with high-stress, high-budget events. "Miss Vance," she asked, her eyes scanning my face for a second before dropping to my practical dress. The flicker of judgment was instantaneous. "Chloe Vance." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "Perfect," she said with a cheerfulness that did not reach her eyes. "We have your seat right here, if you will just follow me." I followed her. And it was a walk. It was the longest walk of my life. She did not just lead me, she paraded me. We started at the front of the ballroom, right past the head table, table 1, where my family was already seated. My mother, Denise, was laughing at something Spencer's father said. My father, James, was already deep in conversation with a man who looked like a senator. Bianca was holding her champagne glass, the picture of a perfect bride. None of them looked up as I passed. It was as if I had already disappeared. Ashley kept a brisk pace, forcing me to hurry. We walked past table 2, table 3, table 4. These were the important friends, the partners from my father's firm, the old money friends of the Harringtons. I saw a few people I recognized from childhood, parents of old friends. They watched me pass, this lone woman being led by the coordinator, and I could see the questions in their eyes. Why was I not at the family table? Why was I being led away? I felt my face burn, but I kept my chin up, focusing on the back of Ashley's blonde head. We walked past table 10. We walked past table 11. We were now in the back quadrant of the massive ballroom. We were walking past the beautifully draped tables for the vendors. The photography team was setting up their equipment. The band was tuning their instruments. And Ashley just kept walking. We were behind the bandstand now. We were walking past the catering station where waiters were lining up trays of champagne. The clatter of plates from the kitchen doors was audible here. The air was no longer perfumed with peonies, it smelled like industrial dish detergent. And finally, in the darkest, most remote corner of the room, she stopped. She stopped right next to a massive structural pillar. It was not a decorative column. It was a huge, round support beam, at least 4 feet wide, clad in the same cold, polished marble as the floor. It was so large that it completely, utterly, and totally blocked the view of the front of the room. You could not see the stage. You could not see the dance floor. You certainly could not see table 1. Tucked behind this pillar in the tiny triangular space between the column and the wall was a single small round table. It was the size of a cocktail table, draped in the same white linen, but it looked like an afterthought, an error. It was set with 1 plate, 1 set of silverware, and 1 single solitary chair. The chair was angled to face the wall because facing any other direction would mean staring directly into the marble. It was positioned directly behind the massive subwoofer for the DJ booth, which was set up about 10 feet away. I knew that as soon as the music started, this table would vibrate so hard the water glass would fall over. And right next to the table, maybe 3 feet away, was a red glowing sign that read "Exit." This was not a table. This was a storage space for a person. Ashley, the coordinator, turned to me. Her smile was so wide, so fake, it looked painful. "Here you are," she announced, as if she had just presented me with a beachfront property. "Your special seat. We wanted to make sure you had privacy." She gestured to the fire exit. "It is right near the fire exit. Very convenient." I just stared at her. I stared at the pillar. I stared at the single chair. This was it. This was the suitable corner Bianca had arranged for me. This was my mother's practical solution. They had not just uninvited me. They had not just dismissed me. They had taken the time and energy to create a specific physical monument to my worthlessness. They had orchestrated this moment. They had instructed this woman to walk me across the entire ballroom, past every person they respected, to this dark, hidden corner, to sit behind a pillar like a mistake, like something to be hidden, like I was not family at all. I looked at Ashley. She was still smiling, waiting for me to sit. "Thank you," I heard myself say. The voice did not sound like mine. It sounded cold and very, very far away. "It's perfect." I sat down. The chair scraped slightly against the polished marble floor. The linen tablecloth was cold stiff. I could already feel the faint, deep thump of the DJ's massive subwoofer vibrating through the floorboards up the legs of the chair and into my bones. I placed my small clutch on the single plate. The air smelled faintly of industrial dish detergent from the swinging kitchen doors nearby. This was not new. This was not even creative. It was just loud. This was the loudest way they had ever told me I did not belong. I looked at the smooth, cold curve of the marble pillar. It was cold to the touch. I traced a dark vein in the stone with my fingernail. No, this was not the first time. It was just the most expensive. My family had been seating me behind pillars my entire life. I remember Bianca's 16th birthday. My sweet 16 had been a small sheet cake in the kitchen on a Tuesday night. Bianca's was a gala, a full-blown gala at the Atlanta Country Club. 200 guests, a live band, an ice sculpture of a swan. I had two friends I wanted to invite, just two. Maya and Simone. We were the nerdy ones, the history club champions, the girls who actually read poetry at lunch. My mother Denise found me addressing the invitations in my room. She picked one up. Maya Johnson, she said. Her voice was full of that polite manufactured concern that was always so much worse than simple anger. Chloe, honey, let's be practical. This is Bianca's night. It's about her future. The Harrington children will be there, the Vanderbilt heirs, your friends. Well, they just wouldn't fit in, would they? I tried to argue. Fit in, Mom. They're my best friends. She sighed. It was a deep, disappointed sigh, the one that always made me feel about 2 inches tall. They're just not our kind of people, Chloe. You understand? This is not a school event. This is society. Bianca is making connections that will last her entire life. Please don't make this difficult. My father James was worse. He overheard us from the doorway of his study. Don't be difficult, Chloe, he said. He did not even look at me. He was straightening his tie in the hall mirror. It's about optics. Your sister is networking. Your friends. They are not part of that world. It's not a judgment, he said, which meant it was absolutely 100% a judgment. It's just a fact. So Maya and Simone were not invited. But the humiliation did not stop there. When I came downstairs the night of the party, wearing the only nice dress I owned, my mother stopped me in the foyer. She was holding a starched white catering-style apron. Here, she said, holding it out. If you're not going to be a guest, you can at least be useful. The catering staff is short-handed. You can help pass out the hors d'oeuvres. I just stood there, paralyzed. I can still feel the stiff, scratchy fabric of that apron in my hands. I was 16 years old, and I was being asked to serve tiny quiches to my sister's friends at her birthday party. I spent that entire night in the kitchen watching through the swinging doors as Bianca was presented with the keys to a brand new white BMW. My parents were beaming. I went home and told Maya and Simone that the party was family only. The sting of that lie felt almost as bad as the apron. That was high school. College was supposed to be my escape, my validation. I worked so hard. I pushed through the loneliness, the feeling of being an imposter. I did not just graduate from the state university. I graduated summa cum laude. I was the class valedictorian for the entire history department. I had my honors cord. I had my diploma. I thought finally they would have to see me. They would have to acknowledge me. They took me to dinner at that same expensive steakhouse my father loved, the one with the dark wood and the waiters who always called him Mr. Vance. I was still buzzing from the ceremony, still feeling the weight of the honors cord on my neck. My father stood up to make a toast. I smiled, thinking this was it. This was my moment. He raised his glass. A toast, he said, his voice full of pride. To Bianca. She just closed her first major marketing deal at her new firm, 24 years old and already on the fast track. That, my friends, is the future. That is a Vance. The table applauded. My mother cried. Bianca looked smug. Then my father, almost as an afterthought, turned to me. He gave a half-hearted wave of his glass. And to Chloe, he said. All those books paid off, I suppose. Valedictorian, Very nice. He turned back to the table. What does one even do with a history degree, dig up graves? The table laughed. It was a joke, so I was supposed to laugh too. But I felt the blood drain from my face. Bianca leaned over, patting my hand. Congratulations, Chloe. I just signed the lease on my new penthouse in Buckhead. You'll have to come see it. The view is incredible. My father beamed at her. We're just so proud to help her get started. A girl like Bianca deserves a place that reflects her status. I just sat there, my $80,000 student loan debt, feeling like a physical weight on my shoulders. Debt I had to take on because when I had asked for help with tuition, my father had told me my hobby was not a worthy investment. He had paid for Bianca's entire Emory MBA. He had paid for her new Audi. He had paid for her penthouse deposit. I was paying for my dusty old books all by myself. So no. Sitting here behind this cold marble pillar, with the thump 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 of the DJ's subwoofer vibrating up my spine, it was not a shock. It was a tradition. I was the family's secret, the unmonetizable asset, the one who studied the past instead of acquiring the future. I was the other Vance, the failure. And tonight, at the most important social event of their lives, the grand union of their new money with Spencer's old money, they had finally found the perfect place for me. Out of sight, out of mind. I pulled out my phone not to check messages, but just to have something to look at, something to create a barrier between me and the muffled sounds of laughter from the other side of the pillar. I felt the vibration of the chair change. Someone was moving. I glanced up expecting to see a waiter clearing my unused plate. But it was not a waiter. I pulled the single chair out and sat down. The marble floor was cold beneath my thin shoes. I looked at the pillar in front of me. It was so close that if I leaned forward, my forehead would touch the cold stone. I was completely, perfectly hidden. The sounds of the wedding, however, were not. I could hear everything. I heard the clinking of champagne glasses. I heard the bursts of laughter from the head table far, far away on the other side of the room. I could make out the high, bright sound of my sister Bianca's laugh. I could hear the deep, booming laugh of my father James as he entertained the politicians at his table. I was invisible, but I was not deaf. I felt the deep, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the DJ's subwoofer vibrate from the floor up into my chair. It was a physical assault, a constant jarring reminder of where I was. At the back, behind the noise, next to the exit. I refused to cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. Even if they could not see me, I would know. I pulled out my phone, the modern shield of the socially uncomfortable. I turned the brightness down, opened my email, and pretended to read something important. I scrolled through old work emails. I scrolled through spam. I stared at the screen so intensely, my eyes started to burn. I was 30 years old. I was a professional historian. I was a good person. And I was being punished again for not being Bianca, for not being the daughter they wanted, for not being rich or flashy or marrying into old money. I was being punished for being me. The humiliation was so profound, so complete, that it almost felt unreal. I was a ghost at my own sister's wedding. Waiters moved past my dark corner, their trays held high, their eyes focused on the real guests in the main room. Not a single one glanced my way. I was not part of the event, I was just collateral damage. The laughter from table 1 erupted again, and this time I could clearly hear my sister's voice. "Oh, Daddy, you are terrible!" she shrieked with delight. I squeezed my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I would not cry. I would sit here. I would eat my cold chicken when it arrived. I would wait until a polite amount of time had passed, and then I would slip out that convenient exit sign and I would go home. I would go back to my quiet apartment, to my dusty books, and I would never ever come back. I would never let them do this to me again. A shadow fell over my phone. I tensed, thinking it was a waiter finally coming to clear my untouched bread plate, Or perhaps to ask why I was sitting in the service area. I looked up annoyed, ready to say I was fine. It was not a waiter. It was a man. He was tall, African American, and wearing a tuxedo that was so perfectly tailored, it made my father and Spencer look like they were in rented costumes. He was without question the most elegant man I had ever seen. He was not one of my father's real estate partners. He was not one of Spencer's pale old money relatives. I had no idea who he was. And he was looking right at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. His eyes were intelligent, sharp, and amused. A deep, smooth voice rumbled, cutting through the bass thumping from the DJ booth. "Excuse me," he said. "Is this seat taken?" I was so flustered I almost laughed. I looked at the single solitary chair I was sitting in, and the empty space at the tiny 2-foot-wide table. I stammered. "No, it is not taken. But you really don't want to sit here. Trust me." He smiled. It was a real smile, not the tight, polite grimace I had seen on everyone else's face all night. It was a smile that reached his eyes. "Why not?" he asked. "Well," I said, gesturing to the massive pillar that was now his view. "For starters, this is it. This is the entire view, and that," I pointed to the giant subwoofer a few feet away, "is the soundtrack. You won't be able to see or hear a single thing. You are much better off standing by the bar." He chuckled softly, a low, pleasant sound. He looked past the pillar for a moment, out toward the main room where my family was performing, and then his gaze settled back on me. "Sometimes," he said, his voice still low and clear, but somehow carrying over the noise, "the best view is not of the stage, it is of the people watching the stage." And before I could say another word, he smoothly pulled out the other chair. A chair that I had not even seen that a waiter must have placed there. He had not been asking about my chair. He had been asking about the one for him. He sat down across from me at the tiny hidden table. He was close. The table was so small our knees almost touched. He adjusted his cufflinks, creating a small, intimate bubble of calm in the middle of this chaotic, cold ballroom. He completely ignored the throbbing bass. He ignored the glowing red exit sign. He just looked at me. "My name is Malcolm," he said. He held out his hand across the table. "Malcolm Dubois." I stared at his hand for a beat. It was strong, confident. I placed my own slightly trembling hand into it. His grip was firm and warm. "Chloe," I said. "Chloe Vance." "I know," he said. Those two words just hung in the air. I pulled my hand back, my mind racing. He knows. How could he possibly know who I am? He saw the complete confusion on my face, and his smile widened just a fraction. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Chloe." This was impossible. No one here was pleased to meet me. No one here even knew I existed. I felt a strange, sudden shift in the air. The crushing humiliation that had been sitting on my chest for an hour began to crack, replaced by a sharp, sudden, and totally unfamiliar feeling. Curiosity. Who was this man? And why in the world was he sitting with me behind the pillar? Malcolm leaned back slightly, creating a small pocket of stillness in the chaos. He looked at me, really looked at me with an intensity that was both unnerving and deeply validating. "You are Chloe Vance, correct?" I was so startled I could only nod. "Yes," I managed to say. "How did you know? Do we know each other?" He smiled that same calm, intelligent smile. "No, we do not. My name is Malcolm Dubois, and I came here this evening hoping I might have the opportunity to meet you." This made no sense. My mind was scrambling. Who was this man? And why would he be looking for me? "You were looking for me." "I was," he confirmed. I must admit it was not easy. I went to the main family table, table 1, expecting to find you seated there. When I did not see you, I asked your father, Mr. Vance, where I might find his other daughter. He seemed confused by the question. I felt a hot flush of shame. Of course my father was confused. He had probably forgotten I was even coming. Malcolm continued, his voice smooth and observant. He pointed me toward your sister, the bride. She was the one who directed me to the wedding coordinator, Miss Ashley. And Miss Ashley, he paused, glancing at the marble pillar, informed me that you had been given this special seat. Her words, not mine. The bitterness rose in my throat, hot and sharp. Yes, I said, my voice tight. Special is one word for it. Convenient for the fire exit. Malcolm's gaze held mine. He did not laugh. He did not offer pity. He simply acknowledged the truth of the situation. I see, he said. Then he leaned forward slightly, his entire demeanor shifting from polite stranger to a man on a mission. Miss Vance Chloe. As I said, my name is Malcolm Dubois. I am the executive director of the National Heritage Foundation. The name sounded important, but I was too lost in my own humiliation to place it. I must have looked blank because he clarified. We are the largest private nonprofit endowment in the country dedicated to the preservation of American history and culture. We manage a portfolio of over $20 billion. My breath caught. 20 billion. What on earth was a man like that doing talking to me behind a pillar? I did not come here for the wedding, Miss Vance, he said, as if reading my mind. I came here for you. Or to be more precise, he added, I came here to find Archivist CV. The world stopped. The thump, thump, thump of the bass faded. The clatter of the kitchen doors, the distant laughter of my family. It all went silent. Archivist CV. That was my anonymous handle. The name I used on the platform I had built from scratch. The Vanguard Archive. My secret. The thing I poured every spare hour into. The dusty old books my family mocked. I could not speak. I must have looked terrified because his expression softened. It is all right, he said gently. Your secret is safe. It took my research team 6 months to link your anonymous digital footprint back to you. Your privacy protocols are formidable. I am surprised you are not in cybersecurity. You know about the Vanguard Archive, I finally whispered. Know about it, he chuckled. Miss Vance, my entire board of directors knows about the Vanguard Archive. The Smithsonian knows about it. The Library of Congress knows about it. They just do not know it is you. They do not know it is one woman working late at night in her apartment, doing the work that entire university departments have failed to do for decades. He leaned in and his voice dropped with passion. What you are doing, it is not just playing with old books. You are not just scanning documents. You are building the single most important database of post-emancipation African American history in the world. The connections you are making, the oral histories from the Georgia sharecroppers that you cross-referenced with lost tax records. The algorithm you wrote to track the migration patterns of families displaced by the Red Summer. Chloe, what you are building is not just history. It is a technological marvel. It is Phi Thung. I just stared at him. This man in his perfect tuxedo was describing my secret passion. My real life's work with the words I had only dreamed of hearing. He saw it. He saw me. He saw the historian. He saw the data scientist. He saw the archivist. We at the Foundation, he continued, have been trying to fund a project exactly like this for 10 years. We were prepared to grant a major university $50 million to start what you have already built, by yourself. I did not, I stammered. I did not know anyone was watching. That is the beauty of it, he said. You did not do it for the recognition. You did it because it needed to be done. We know. And we are not just impressed, Chloe. We are profoundly, deeply impressed. Malcolm leaned back his own impressive frame, seeming to create a shield for me against the rest of the room. He was silent for a long moment. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking past the pillar, his sharp, intelligent eyes scanning the main ballroom. I was hidden from them, but he had a perfect one-way view of them. He watched my father James hold court, laughing, his arms spread wide as if embracing the entire room that he had paid for. He watched my mother Denise flutter from person to person, a social butterfly, ensuring every important guest felt seen, all while never once glancing toward the dark corner where her own daughter was hidden. Then his eyes narrowed. I saw his jaw tighten just slightly. I followed his gaze. My sister Bianca, the bride, was looking directly toward our corner. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the pillar itself, a landmark of her victory. She nudged her new husband Spencer and whispered something in his ear. Spencer, the man from the great Harrington family, glanced over. His upper lip curled in a tiny, almost imperceptible sneer of distaste. It was the look of a man who sees something unpleasant on the bottom of his shoe. He did not see a person. He saw a problem that had been in his mind correctly and efficiently hidden. He murmured something back to Bianca, and she let out that high, sharp laugh, the laugh that had always been at my expense. They turned away back to their circle of adoring, important guests. They were satisfied. The problem of Chloe was solved. Malcolm watched the entire exchange. He watched the whisper, the sneer, the dismissive laugh. He saw them turn their backs, their body language radiating complete casual cruelty. He turned his gaze back to me. The amusement in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by something else, a cold, clear understanding. And beneath that, a flicker of protective anger that I had never seen anyone direct on my behalf. He had just witnessed in one 30-second exchange my entire childhood. He had seen the family dynamic played out in miniature. The golden child, the dismissive parents, and the invisible daughter. He finally truly understood why I was sitting behind a pillar. He nodded slowly to himself, as if a final piece of a puzzle had just clicked into place. His entire posture changed. He was no longer just a kind stranger. He was an ally. He was a force. I understand now, he said, his voice low and firm. I just looked down at my hands, the hot sting of shame returning. You understand what? That my own family is so embarrassed by me, they have to hide me behind the architecture. No, he said, and his voice was so full of certainty it made me look up. I understand that they have absolutely no idea who you are. I gave a short, bitter laugh. They know who I am. I am Chloe, the quiet one, the boring one, the sister who works at the university, the one who did not bring a date and wears dresses from Macy's. They see me perfectly clearly. They see a caricature, Chloe, he said. They see the story they wrote for you. They have no idea about the woman sitting in front of me. The woman who built the Vanguard archive. The woman who just secured a $50 million valuation for a project that will change how history is taught in this country. 80 million. I whispered, still reeling from what he had said earlier. He smiled. 80 million, even better. He glanced at his watch, a classic, elegant timepiece. It is 7:30. The speeches are about to begin. He looked at me, a new, powerful idea forming in his eyes. Miss Vance, he said, I came here tonight with one intention. I was going to find you, introduce myself, and hand you a check for the first installment of our $10 million grant. I was going to do it quietly, professionally, but... He paused, glancing back toward the main room where my father was now moving toward the stage microphone. But given the seating arrangement, I feel that a quiet approach would be a disservice, not just to you, but to them. What do you mean? I asked, my heart suddenly beating fast against my ribs. I mean, Malcolm said that they have gone to extraordinary lengths to make you invisible tonight. I think it is only fair that we go to equal lengths to make you seen. He smiled, and this time it was not just a kind smile. It was a smile full of power strategy and a delicious hint of conspiracy. It was the smile of a man who knows he is holding all the cards. I am about to be called to the stage, he said. Your father thinks I am here as a courtesy to the Harrington family. He has no idea that I am here for you. He has no idea that my foundation holds the note on the building his entire company is leveraged against. He has no idea about any of it. My jaw dropped. What? He held up a hand. Not important right now. What is important is this. He leaned forward, his voice compelling. In about 5 minutes, your father is going to finish his speech. Then he is going to introduce me because he thinks my presence validates his new alliance. And when I go up there, I am going to tell the truth. But I need your permission, and I need your participation. My participation? How? He held out his hand to me across the table, the same strong, warm hand as before. You are going to do 2 things. First, from this moment on, you are my date. You are not the forgotten sister. You are the honored guest of the keynote speaker. Second, when I call your name, I want you to stand up. And I want you to walk to that stage with your head held high. No more hiding. No more apologies. I stared at his outstretched hand. The bass was still thumping. The laughter from table 1 was still drifting over. But suddenly, they all seemed very, very far away. All I could see was this man, this stranger, offering me a choice. I could stay here in the dark, safe and invisible. Or I could take his hand. Just follow my lead, he said softly. Trust me. They wanted to give you a suitable corner. I am about to give you the entire room. I took a slow, steadying breath and placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. It was an anchor in the middle of this cold, spinning room. Okay, I whispered. I trust you. Malcolm gave my hand a brief, reassuring squeeze before releasing it. He settled back into his chair, the picture of calm confidence. Good, he said. Now we just enjoy the show. And what a show it was. A few minutes later, the lights in the grand ballroom dimmed just slightly. The string quartet, which had been playing softly in the background, reached a crescendo and then fell silent. A warm golden spotlight hit the small elevated stage at the front of the room. The stage was framed by 2 massive overflowing urns of white peonies and orchids, the sheer cost of which could have probably funded my university archive for a year. A hush fell over the 200 guests. The clinking of silverware stopped. Every eye in the room except for ours turned toward the stage. My father, James Vance, stepped into the spotlight. He was radiant. He was in his element. His custom tuxedo fit him perfectly. His broad shoulders were back. He was holding a wireless microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. He positively glowed with pride and self-satisfaction. This was the moment he had paid for. This was his coronation just as much as it was Bianca's. He tapped the microphone twice, sending a small thump-thump through the speakers, a sound that seemed to echo the nervous beat of my own heart. I could see my mother Denise at table 1 looking up at him with an expression of pure adoration. She was the queen, and he was her king. Bianca and Spencer were seated beside them, holding hands, the perfect, beautiful couple. Spencer looked bored, but Bianca was watching my father with the same rapt attention as my mother. They were united. The perfect Vance family front and center. And then there was me, hidden behind a 2-ton block of marble sitting at a table meant for luggage. I should have felt that familiar crushing wave of humiliation. I should have wanted to slide out the nearby exit door and disappear. But I did not. Because this time I was not alone. Malcolm sat across from me, his face partially in shadow. He was not looking at the stage, he was watching me. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod as if to say, "Stay strong. It's coming." My father raised his glass. His voice, amplified by the expensive sound system, boomed across the ballroom. "Welcome," he said, his voice rich and full of false emotion. "Welcome, friends. Welcome, family. Welcome to the proudest, proudest night of my life. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. My wife Denise and I. We are just overwhelmed. We are overwhelmed with joy. To look out at this beautiful room, To see all our friends, our family, our new family, it is a lot. It truly is. Tonight is the proudest night of my life. And I mean that. The absolute proudest. Because tonight, I get to celebrate my daughter, my firstborn, my Bianca. Now many of you have known Bianca since she was a little girl. You knew her when she was winning spelling bees. You knew her when she was captain of the cheerleading squad. You knew her when she graduated top of her class at Emory. This is a girl who, well, she has always been a star. She was born to be in the spotlight. She is intelligent. She is beautiful. She is ambitious. She has that Vance fire. She is a winner. My Bianca never ever accepts second place. Because second place was always reserved for me. That was my spot. The one just out of the light. The one who was practical and good enough. The one who was not a star. Bianca always knew what she wanted. She knew what she was worth. She would not just settle for anything. She would not just settle for anyone. She waited. She held out for the best. And today, she has brought into our family a truly remarkable young man. A man from a truly remarkable family. Spencer Harrington. Now I know Spencer's family, the Harringtons. What can you even say? Their name is etched into the very foundation of New England. This is a family of substance, a family of history, a family of true, lasting legacy. When Bianca first brought Spencer home, I said to Denise, that is it. That is the one. Because greatness recognizes greatness. And the Harringtons are quite simply the best. We are so honored to be united with them tonight. So honored. I have built Vance Properties from the dirt. I came to Atlanta with nothing but a dream and the will to work. And I built an empire. But an empire is just bricks and mortar if you do not have a future. If you do not have a legacy. And today is not just a wedding. Let us be clear about that. We are all here for a party, yes. We are here to celebrate love, of course. But this is more than that. This is an alliance. This is a merger of two great families. This is the foundation of a new legacy for the Vances. A legacy that will last for generations. My Bianca, she has not just made a good match. She has secured our future. She has elevated the Vance name. She has done what I always knew she would do. She has won. She has secured her place at the top. And she has brought all of us with her. Our family. The Vance family is starting a new chapter tonight. A chapter of power, of influence, of permanence. Thanks to this beautiful union. Thanks to my daughter's ambition and my new son's incredible lineage. So I want you all to stand. Stand with me. Stand with Denise. Stand and raise your glasses high. To the happy couple, yes, but more than that, to the future, to the alliance, to the Vance Harrington legacy. To Bianca and Spencer. The applause in the ballroom was deafening. My father James was beaming, basking in the adoration of the room. He turned and handed the microphone to my sister. Bianca rose and the room somehow grew even quieter, every guest leaning in, captivated by the beautiful bride. She dabbed a single perfect tear from the corner of her eye with a lace handkerchief. "Oh, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "Thank you. That was just beautiful." She turned her brilliant smile to the rest of the room. "Thank you all so much for being here. Looking out at all of your faces, I just feel so incredibly lucky. I am the luckiest woman in the world." She reached out and squeezed Spencer's hand, who looked up at her, his face a mask of polite adoration. "I have a new wonderful family in the Harringtons," she continued. "And I have the most amazing family in the Vances. A family," she said, her voice gaining strength, "that has supported me 100%. Every dream, every goal. They have always been there for me. Always." She paused, and I saw her gaze drift from the head table just slightly. Her eyes unfocused for a second, scanning the back of the room in the general direction of my pillar. The smile on her face tightened, becoming less of a bride's joy and more of a victor's smirk. "We all know," she said, her tone shifting to one of profound fake sincerity, "that no family is perfect. Of course not. And sometimes there are members who are a little more difficult than others." I felt the words land like small sharp stones. I could feel Malcolm stiffen slightly beside me. He knew exactly who she was talking about. I could see my mother Denise nod in sad, martyred agreement from her seat. Bianca continued, "Sometimes there are people who just don't understand what it means to be part of a team. People who choose their own strange little paths and expect everyone else to applaud." Her eyes flicked back to her new husband. "But what this process has taught me, what my parents have always taught me, is what really matters. What matters," she said, her voice rising for the finale, "is family. And what matters is loyalty." She raised her glass high. "You stick by the people who stick by you. You celebrate the people who show up for you. And you build a legacy based on those values. Loyalty, family. That is what tonight is all about. So thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Mommy, for always being loyal to me. I love you all so much." The room erupted in applause again. It was a masterful performance. In one short speech, she had painted herself as the loving, loyal daughter, and me hidden in the shadows as the difficult, disloyal, unworthy other. She had justified my exclusion without ever having to say my name. I felt sick. The applause for Bianca was deafening. My mother Denise was openly weeping with pride. My father James was clapping so hard his palms must have been stinging. Bianca curtsied a little theatrical bow to her adoring audience. She was the queen. She had won. She had secured her legacy and in the process had publicly finally erased me. I sank even lower behind my pillar. The deep, vibrating thump of the bass from the DJ's subwoofer felt like a hammer striking my ribs over and over. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to crawl out the exit door and never look back. The applause was dying down now, fading into the happy, satisfied chatter of 200 wealthy guests. The waiters began to move again, their silver trays flashing as they moved to clear the plates. The show was over. And then Malcolm moved. He had not said a single word during Bianca's entire cutting speech. He just sat there in the shadow of the pillar observing. Now he placed his linen napkin neatly on the table beside his untouched plate. He did not make a sound. He did not cough to clear his throat. He did not scrape his chair. He simply stood up. It was a slow, deliberate, and utterly commanding movement. Malcolm Dubois was a tall man, at least 6'4", and his perfectly tailored tuxedo made him seem even taller in the dim light. He was an island of absolute stillness in the moving, chaotic room. He was not on the stage. He was not in the spotlight. He was in the dark, back by the service exit, hidden behind a massive marble pillar. And yet his simple, silent act of standing up had more gravity, more weight than anything my father had done with a microphone and a spotlight. The nearest table, the one with the wedding vendors, noticed first. The photographers stopped packing their lenses and looked over confused. Then the waiters who were clearing table 11 paused mid-reach, their trays balanced on their arms. A woman at table 10, the one closest to us, turned around in her chair to see what the waiters were looking at. This created a ripple, a wave of silence that moved like a shadow from the back of the room all the way to the front. The chatter died, the clinking of forks stopped. The string quartet, which had just started to play a soft interlude, faltered, one violin squeaking into an awkward silence. Within 10 seconds, 200 heads had turned away from the brightly lit stage. They turned away from the bride and groom. They turned away from my parents at the head table. They all turned their faces a sea of confusion and stared into the dark, forgotten corner of the ballroom. They stared at the pillar. They stared at the magnificent, unknown man who was now standing next to it. And because I was sitting right beside him, they stared at me. I froze. I wanted to slide under the table. I wanted to evaporate. This was a million times worse than being invisible. This was being seen at the very moment of my greatest humiliation. I could see my mother Denise squinting from across the room, trying to understand what was happening. I could see my father James still on the stage frowning. He was clearly deeply annoyed that his perfectly orchestrated event was being interrupted. He gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. This was his party. This was his show, and some unknown man was stealing his spotlight from the cheap seats. "Excuse me," my father said into the microphone. His voice boomed across the silent room, sharp and irritated. "Excuse me, friend, are you lost? The restrooms are to the left." He was trying to dismiss him, to embarrass him, to make him small just as he had always done to me. "We are in the middle of a private event here," my father continued, his authority returning. But Malcolm was not me. He did not look embarrassed. He did not shrink. He did not even look at my father on the stage. He simply looked around the silent, watchful room. And then he spoke. His voice was not amplified by a microphone. He did not shout. But it was the kind of trained, powerful voice that commanded attention. A voice that carried over the silence, reaching every single corner of the ballroom as clear as a bell. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," Malcolm said. His tone was smooth, professional, but laced with an undeniable, unshakable authority that froze my father where he stood. That was a truly inspiring speech, especially your points on legacy. My father James was still on the stage, microphone in hand, frozen. He looked like a man who had just had the rules of his own game changed without his permission. Malcolm's voice, calm and unhurried, filled the room again. "My name," he said, and I could feel the entire room lean in, "is Malcolm Dubois." A ripple of sound went through the front tables. Not the family tables, but the guest tables. The politician my father had been schmoozing with earlier sat up straighter. I saw him whisper something to the man beside him. Spencer's father, the patriarch of the old money, Harrington's, actually turned his full body in his chair. He knew that name. My father, I realized with a jolt, did not. "I am the executive director," Malcolm continued, "of the National Heritage Foundation." Another murmur. This one was louder. The National Heritage Foundation was not just some local charity. It was a massive $20 billion endowment. It was one of the most powerful cultural institutions in the United States. It was the kind of legacy my father could only dream of. Malcolm's eyes scanned the room, bypassing my family entirely and settling on the other important guests. "I am sure many of you were surprised to see me here tonight. I must confess I am not here as a guest of the Harrington family, nor am I here as a guest of the Vance family." My father's face, which had been frozen in annoyance, now contorted into pure baffled confusion. If Malcolm was not his guest, and not the Harringtons' guest, then who was he? Bianca leaned over to Spencer, her perfect smile now a tight, strained line. I was too far away to hear, but I could read her lips perfectly. "What the hell is he talking about?" Spencer, for his part, looked genuinely alarmed. He was pale. He clearly knew who Malcolm Dubois was, and he clearly had no idea why he was at his wedding. "I am here tonight." Malcolm's voice cut through the confusion. "For a very specific purpose. I am here to honor one of the most important and most elusive historical thinkers of our generation." A wave of confused whispers. What was this, a joke? Was this part of the entertainment? "For the past 2 years," Malcolm continued, "my foundation, along with partners at the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress, has been trying to identify the founder of a specific anonymous project. A project that has, with no funding and no institutional support, done more to secure our shared American history than any other organization in the last 50 years. He was talking about me. He was talking about my work. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I wanted to tell him to stop. This was too much. This was my secret. My one safe place away from my family's judgment. "I am here tonight." Malcolm said, his voice ringing with passion, to honor the anonymous founder of the Vanguard Archive. The name meant nothing to my family. They looked bored, annoyed by this interruption to their party. But at the front tables, the politician and the Harringtons were now staring at Malcolm, completely transfixed. They knew the archive. For those of you who may not be in the historical or tech fields, Malcolm said, his gaze sweeping the room. The Vanguard Archive is a private encrypted digital platform that has saved, digitized, and cross-referenced hundreds of thousands of documents from African American history. We are not talking about the documents you find in textbooks. We are talking about the lost diaries of sharecroppers in Mississippi, the legal defense funds from the Atlanta washerwomen's strike of 1881, the personal letters, the property deeds, the church records that were intentionally left to rot in attics and damp basements, destroyed by a country that wanted to forget. He took a breath, and the room held it with him. This one person, this archivist CV as they are known, has single-handedly built a fortress of memory, a place of resurrection. A project that the United States Senate, in a special commendation last month, officially designated a national treasure. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. My father looked lost. My sister looked annoyed. A national treasure. What did this have to do with her wedding? Malcolm looked around the room one last time. We at the Foundation have spent 2 years searching for this brilliant anonymous founder, and tonight, I am unbelievably honored to say, we found her. His voice was still ringing in the air, the words "we found her," hanging over the stunned crowd. Every guest was silent, looking at him, waiting. My father James on the stage looked utterly lost. He was no longer in control. This unknown powerful man was. Malcolm kept his gaze on the room, letting the anticipation build to an unbearable point. He was a master orator, and I realized he was not just giving a speech, he was conducting an orchestra of this room's emotions. The founder of this national treasure, Malcolm continued, his voice dropping just a fraction, making everyone lean in. The brilliant mind behind archivist CV is actually here, in this room, tonight. A gasp went through the front tables. The politician looked around as if expecting a celebrity to be revealed. My father's jaw was slack. My mother Denise was looking at Bianca as if asking, "Did you invite someone famous and not tell me?" Bianca just looked confused and angry. Her party was being hijacked. Then Malcolm did it. He turned. He turned away from the main room, away from the important guests, away from the stage. He turned his whole body slowly, deliberately toward the back corner of the room. He turned toward the service exit. He turned toward the DJ's vibrating subwoofer. He turned toward the pillar, and he looked right at me. His eyes found mine in the dim light, and then he smiled. He was not just looking at me, he was presenting me. That founder, he said, his voice now ringing with pride, has been sitting quietly among you all night. Ladies and gentlemen, the board of the National Heritage Foundation, the partners at the Smithsonian, and I are privileged and humbled to be the new primary partners for the Vanguard Archive. Please join me in finally giving the honor she is due to Miss Chloe Vance. And then he extended his hand, not to shake mine, but to offer it to me, to lead me out of the darkness. Silence. It was not just quiet. It was a vacuum. It was the total, complete absence of sound. The clinking of glasses stopped. The whispers stopped. The string quartet, which had been silent, seemed to hold its breath. I heard a single sharp sound from a table nearby, a metal fork dropped from a nerveless hand clattering loudly against a porcelain plate. I saw my father James on the stage. His hand, which was still holding his champagne flute, went slack. The glass did not shatter, it just slipped. It fell from his fingers, tumbled in a slow-motion arc, and hit the plush carpet with a soft, wet thud. A dark, expensive stain spread instantly at his feet. He did not even look down. His eyes were wide, staring at me. I saw my mother Denise. Her perfectly manicured hand, the one with the massive diamond, flew to her mouth. Her lipstick, a perfect sharp red, was now smudged as she gasped a silent "oh." Her eyes were not just surprised, they were horrified. This was not possible. This could not be happening. I saw Spencer the groom, the old money Harrington heir. His pale aristocratic face went a shade paler. His mask of polite boredom was gone, replaced by the raw, slack-jawed shock of a man who has just seen a ghost. He looked from me to Malcolm and back to me, his mind clearly racing, trying to understand how the equation of the night had just been so completely, irreversibly broken. And then I saw Bianca, my sister, the bride, the queen. She was still standing, her glass raised from my father's toast, and the smile, the beautiful, radiant, victorious smile, was still frozen on her face. It was perfect. It was also now a grotesque mask. Her eyes, which had been sparkling with triumph, were now wide and blank, staring at me. She looked like a doll that had just been dropped and shattered. The smile did not fade. It just broke. It cracked at the edges. The joy was gone, replaced by a dawning, terrifying, and absolute horror. She could not understand. How? How could Chloe, the failure, the inconvenience, the girl in the Macy's dress, the person behind the pillar, how could she be the one this magnificent, powerful man was honoring? I looked at Malcolm. He was still smiling at me, his hand still outstretched. He was waiting. The entire room was waiting. I took a breath. The thump, thump, thump of the subwoofer was still there, but I could not feel it anymore. All I could feel was the warm, steady strength of my own pulse. I pushed my single chair back. The scrape against the floor was loud in the silence. I stood up. I put my small, simple clutch on the table. And I emerged from the shadow of the pillar, stepping into the dim light. I felt 200 pairs of eyes land on me. I kept my chin high. I walked the 3 steps to Malcolm Dubois, and I placed my hand in his. Malcolm's hand was warm and firm. He did not lead me out of the corner. He led me through the room. He did not hurry. He walked with a slow, deliberate pace, his hand securely holding mine. And as we walked, I could feel the eyes, 200 pairs of eyes burning into my back. I kept my chin high, my eyes locked on Malcolm. We were not walking toward the stage. We were just walking, cutting a path directly through the center of the ballroom toward the head table, toward my family. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the click of my own modest heels on the marble floor. As we approached table 1, my father James finally seemed to find his voice. He had stepped off the stage, his face a mask of complete and total confusion. "Malcolm," my father said, trying to regain control, his voice strained. "Mr. Dubois, I don't understand. What is this joke, Chloe? What is going on?" Malcolm stopped walking. We were standing right in front of them now, right in front of Bianca's frozen, shattered smile. Malcolm was still holding my hand. He turned to my father, his expression polite but icy. "It is no joke, Mr. Vance," Malcolm said, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "We at the National Heritage Foundation, along with several of our technology partners in Silicon Valley, are proud to be the principal investors in Miss Vance's platform." He looked at me, a smile touching his eyes. "The Vanguard Archive is more than just a passion project. It is a brilliant piece of technology, and the market agrees." He turned his gaze back to my father, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. "As I am sure you know from your own business dealings, Mr. Vance's valuations are everything," Malcolm said. "I am pleased to announce that as of last week, our investment team in partnership with Andreessen Horowitz has just closed the Series B funding round for the Vanguard Archive." My father just stared blankly. He knew those names. Andreessen Horowitz. He knew what they meant. "The round," Malcolm continued, "has valued Miss Vance's platform, her technology, and her intellectual property at $80 million. $80 million. I think my heart stopped. Even I did not know that number. I knew the valuation was high, but I had not seen the final Series B figures. I must have looked as shocked as my family. because Malcolm squeezed my hand gently as if to say, "Just go with it." My mother, Denise, made a small choking sound. 80 million. Bianca's face was no longer frozen. It was crumbling. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her custom makeup looking like a chalky mask. $80 million. Malcolm was not finished. He was enjoying this. "The Foundation's own contribution to this round," he said, as if discussing pocket change, "is an initial grant of $10 million. This will fund Miss Vance's global expansion, her new research fellowship, and of course," he paused, "allow her to finally build the team she deserves." He smiled warmly at me. "She has been doing the work of 50 people all by herself for far too long. We are thrilled to finally give her the resources that a national treasure warrants." $10 million. $80 million. The numbers echoed in the vast, silent ballroom. My father James looked like he could not breathe. His entire speech, his entire life had been about building his real estate empire, Vance Properties. He saw himself as the king of Atlanta. But $80 million, that was a number that dwarfed his. And it belonged to me, the daughter he had hidden behind a pillar. Malcolm was still holding my hand. He gave it a gentle tug, and I realized he was leading me to the head table. We walked right up to my stunned, silent family. Bianca's face was a terrible mottled mask of rage and disbelief. My mother looked like she was going to faint. Malcolm did not address them. Instead, he turned his gaze to my father, and to the now white-as-a-sheet groom, Spencer Harrington. "And this," Malcolm said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, "brings me to another interesting point." He looked directly at my father. "Mr. Vance, you gave a very passionate speech about your new alliance with the Harrington family, about the merging of two great legacies. Harrington Capital, I believe you called it." My father just nodded dumbly, his eyes wide. "Well," Malcolm said, "as part of our foundation's due diligence in investing in Miss Vance, we naturally conduct a thorough review of all her familial connections and potential liabilities. We believe in protecting our investments, and that of course includes the Harrington family, who she was about to be related to through marriage." Spencer Harrington, who had been frozen in his chair, suddenly stood up. His voice was sharp, panicked. "You have no right," he stammered. "You have no right to discuss my family's private business. This is a wedding." Malcolm did not even raise his voice. He just fixed Spencer with a look so cold, so utterly commanding, that Spencer froze. "Sit down, Mr. Harrington," Malcolm said. It was not a request, it was an order. Spencer, after a beat of defiance, slowly, stiffly sat back down. The entire room watched this exchange. This powerful unknown man had just publicly silenced the groom. Malcolm turned his gaze back to my father. "Mr. Vance, as a fellow businessman, I am surprised you did not do your own due diligence, because our investigation, which was quite simple, actually just involved checking public records, revealed something troubling." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "It seems Harrington Capital, the great legacy you spoke of, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection yesterday afternoon at 3 p.m. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was not a murmur. It was a single, unified sound of shock. My father's knees visibly buckled. He had to grip the back of Bianca's chair to stay standing. "Bankruptcy," my mother whispered. "No, that's not possible." "It is quite possible," Malcolm said flatly. "And it is public record. Their debts total over $120 million. They are insolvent. They are for all intents and purposes broke." He then looked at my father, his gaze absolutely pitiless. "Mr. Vance, the alliance you were celebrating tonight, it was not an alliance. It was an acquisition. And you were the one being acquired." He gestured to Spencer, who was now staring at his plate, his face slick with sweat. "This young man was not marrying your daughter for her charm. He was marrying her to get access to your company, to Vance Properties. He was marrying her to get his hands on your lines of credit to try and save his own bankrupt family from ruin." He let that sink in. "You were not gaining a legacy, Mr. Vance. You were being targeted by a con man. Your daughter." He looked at Bianca, whose face was now a mask of pure unadulterated fury, was being used to pay for their financial rescue. Malcolm looked at me. And my partner, he said the word landing with the force of a gavel, was hidden behind a pillar, so that this fraudulent transaction could take place without any complications. The silence that followed Malcolm's last words was heavier, deeper than before. It was a silence no one could misunderstand. He had not just interrupted a wedding. He had detonated a bomb and we were all standing in the blast radius. It was Bianca who broke it. Her reaction was not a whisper or a gasp. It was a scream. A raw, guttural animal sound that ripped through the elegant ballroom. No! She lunged from her chair, her custom Vera Wang dress ripping with a faint, tearing sound as it caught on the centerpiece. She grabbed Spencer, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the lapels of his tuxedo. "You liar!" she shrieked, not at Malcolm, but at her new husband. "He is lying, Spencer! Tell me he is lying! Tell me!" Spencer Harrington. The man from the great Harrington family, the man carved from soap, just stared at her. His mouth was open. No sound came out. His face was a sickly pale green. He could not lie. He could not deny it. Because it was true. Public record. He was a fraud. He was broke. And he had just been exposed in front of 200 of Atlanta's most powerful people. Spencer. Bianca shook him, her entire body trembling with a fury that was terrifying to watch. "Say something. Tell them he is a liar." "Now see here," a new voice cut in. Spencer's father, a tall, thin man with a face like old parchment, stood up from table one. He was shaking, but with rage, not fear. "Who in God's name do you think you are, sir?" He aimed at Malcolm. "Mr. Dubois, is it? You have no right to come in here and spread these insolent falsehoods. This is a private celebration. I will have you removed for slander." Malcolm did not even flinch. He just looked at Spencer's father. "Falsehoods. Mr. Harrington, are you denying that Harrington Capital filed for Chapter 11 protection yesterday at 3 p.m. at the United States Bankruptcy Court for the District of Delaware, because my legal team has the filing number? I can have it projected onto that rather large screen behind the stage if you prefer." Spencer's father stopped. His mouth snapped shut. The threat of projection of receipts was the one thing his old money bluster could not defeat. He knew he was beaten. He collapsed back into his chair, defeated. Bianca saw it. She saw her new father-in-law surrender. She saw her husband mute and sweating, offering no defense. The truth hit her. It was all real. The money was gone. The alliance was a lie. The legacy was a sham. Her entire life, her entire worth had been built on this one single achievement, and it was fraudulent. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, no, no." She turned her eyes wild, searching for her own father. "Daddy." But my father, James Vance, was not looking at her. He was not looking at Spencer. He was not looking at Malcolm. He was staring into the middle distance, his hand gripping the back of Bianca's empty chair. His face was a dark ashen gray. His chest was rising and falling in short, rapid gasps. He looked at Bianca, his eyes filled with a dawning horror, a terrible understanding. He was the mark. He was the fool. His empire, his legacy, his obsession with social climbing, it had all been used against him. He had been played by the very people he so desperately wanted to join. He was not gaining a legacy. He was the exit strategy for a family of bankrupt con artists. "James," my mother Denise said, her voice small and terrified. She touched his arm. My father made a choking sound. He grabbed at his chest, his tie, his own throat, as if he could not get enough air. He was not just embarrassed. He looked, as Malcolm had so clinically stated, like he was being acquired. He looked like he was having a heart attack. The room erupted. Guests were standing now, whispering urgently. Phones were slowly, discreetly being raised. The politician my father had been so proud to host was now looking at him with a cold, appraising stare, the look of a man calculating political fallout. The wedding coordinator Ashley was running toward the head table, her face a mask of panic. The wedding, the perfect, expensive legacy-building wedding, was over. And I just stood there next to Malcolm holding his hand. I watched my sister's world disintegrate. I watched my father's pride crumble to dust. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I did not even feel anger. I just felt cold. A cold, clear, and terrible justice. They had built this entire event on a foundation of lies. Lies about their status, lies about their future, and lies about me. Now all the lies were being exposed at once. The pillar I had been hidden behind suddenly felt like the only stable thing in the entire room. The chaos at the head table was total. Bianca was still screaming a terrible animal sound of pure rage, her words dissolving into incoherent shrieks. Spencer was mute, his face slick with sweat, a living statue of his own ruin. Spencer's father was trying to speak to a hotel security guard who had cautiously approached, but his voice was trembling. And my father, James Vance. He had been holding on to Bianca's chair to stay upright, but now he let go. He looked at the wreckage of his grand alliance. He looked at his star daughter who was now sobbing and clawing at her own hair. He looked at his blue-blood son-in-law, a penniless con man. He looked at the 200 guests who were all filming this on their phones. And then he looked at me. His eyes were wide, desperate. All the arrogance, all the booming pride from his speech was gone. He looked like a drowning man. He took one step then another, stumbling over the champagne flute he had dropped on the floor. He was walking toward me. He was walking past Bianca. He was walking past his wife. He was coming to me. "Chloe," he said. His voice was a dry, cracking whisper. It was not a command. It was a plea. "Chloe, you knew about this." I just looked at him. I did not nod. I did not say a word. "Chloe, please," he said, his hands fluttering at his sides, wanting to reach for me, but not daring to. "You have to help me. You have to. You have to fix this. This is Vance Properties. This is everything I have built. This is the family legacy." The family legacy. The same legacy he had told the entire room just 10 minutes ago that I was not a part of. The same legacy he had built by dismissing me, by calling my work a hobby, by telling me I was not a worthy investment. He was not asking his daughter for help. He was asking an asset. A newly revealed $80 million asset. He was looking at me, but he was seeing a lifeboat. Before I could answer, my mother, Denise, pushed past him. Her face was a wreck. Her perfect makeup was streaming down her cheeks in black mascara-stained rivers. Her eyes were wild. She was not crying for me, or even for Bianca. She was crying for the social status that was evaporating in front of her. She ran to me and did something she had not done in 20 years. She grabbed my hands. Her grip was not soft. It was not motherly. It was a claw. Her diamonds dug into my skin. "Chloe, baby," she sobbed, her voice high and frantic. "Chloe, please, you have to do something. Tell him to stop. Tell that man, tell Mr. Dubois to take it back. He is your friend. He will listen to you." She was hysterical. She was pulling at my arms, trying to physically drag me toward Malcolm as if I were a toy she could present to him to make the bad things go away. "Mom, stop," I said, trying to pull my hands free. "No, you do not understand," she wailed, and I could smell the expensive champagne on her breath. "He listens to you. They are ruining us. They are ruining Bianca. This is your sister's wedding day. You are smart, Chloe. You are the smart one. We always said that, did not we, James? We always said Chloe was the smart one." I just stared at her. The hypocrisy was so staggering it left me breathless. This was the same woman who not an hour ago had watched me be seated behind a pillar. The same woman who had dismissed my dress as practical. The same woman who had smiled in agreement when Bianca called me disloyal and difficult. They were not apologizing. I realized that with a cold, sinking clarity. They were not apologizing for hiding me. They were not apologizing for a lifetime of humiliation. They were not sorry for the pain they had caused me. They were just sorry that the man they had humiliated turned out to be the only person in the room who could save them. My mother was still clinging to my arm. Please, Chloe, your father, his company, everything we have worked for, it is all on the line because of this. This mess Spencer lied to us. He lied to Bianca. But you can make this right. Tell Mr. Dubois. Tell him it was all a mistake. Tell him your father will fix the Harrington debt. Just make him stop talking. Mom, I said, and my voice was so cold, so steady it startled even me. I pulled my arm free from her grasp. Stop talking. You stop talking. She froze. I had never ever spoken to her like that. I looked at my father. He was still standing there, a broken man. I looked at my mother, a panicking, selfish woman. I looked over at Bianca, who was now being half carried out of the ballroom by her bridesmaids, her sobs echoing. You want me to help you. I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden lull. You want me to fix this? My father nodded eagerly. Yes, Chloe. Anything. We will make it right with you. We will put you back in the will. Just help us. The will, I said. The will that you cut me out of. The family you hid me from. The legacy you said I was not worthy of. I was wrong, Chloe, my father stammered. I was wrong. I see that now. You are brilliant. We are so proud. I almost laughed. You are proud. You are proud now. Now that my valuation is $80 million. Now that my partner. I said, gesturing to Malcolm, who was watching this all with a calm, clinical detachment, is the one man in this room who can destroy you or save you. You are not proud. You are terrified. My mother's hand. I looked at it, still clamped on my arm. Her diamond symbols of her success were digging painfully into my skin. Her face was a ruin of smeared makeup and pure, undiluted panic. She was not the composed, elegant matriarch anymore. She was a terrified woman clinging to the daughter she had dismissed just minutes earlier. My father was right beside her, his face gray, his eyes wide and desperate, begging me. I looked at her hand, and then I uncurled her fingers from my arm one by one and pulled my hand free. The action was gentle, but the finality of it made her gasp. She recoiled, as if I had burned her. I finally saw them. I really saw them. For my entire life they had been giants, figures of immense power whose approval I had craved like oxygen, and whose disappointment had felt like a physical death. But now, in the harsh, chaotic light of this disaster, I saw them as they truly were. Two small, terrified, selfish people. I saw two people who had built their entire identity on a foundation of appearances, social climbing, and the validation of others. And now that their carefully constructed world was collapsing, they were not looking at me with love. They were not looking at me with remorse for a lifetime of cruelty. They were looking at me like I was a tool, a fire extinguisher, a key. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, colder and sharper than any insult. They were not sorry. They were not sorry for seating me behind a pillar. They were not sorry for the Macy's comment. They were not sorry for the decades of humiliation, for calling my work playing with dusty books. They were not sorry that they had hidden me, dismissed me, and belittled me. They were just sorry. They were sorry that the one person they had thrown away had just been valued at $80 million. They were sorry that the failure in the practical dress now had a partner who could with a single phone call expose their new precious in-laws as bankrupt frauds. They were not sorry they hurt me. They were just sorry that they needed me. My father James must have seen the shift in my expression. The desperate pleading hope in his eyes flickered, replaced by his old familiar impatience. He was trying to regain control. "Chloe, please," he growled, his voice low and urgent. "Stop being so dramatic. This is not about feelings. This is about the family. This is about Vance Properties. This is about my legacy." I almost laughed. The sound that came out of my throat was dry, harsh, and utterly unfamiliar. It startled even me. I turned to face him fully. The fear was gone. The dread was gone. All that was left was this strange, icy calm. "Legacy," I repeated. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to cut through the noise of the room. The remaining guests had fallen silent again, watching this final terrible scene unfold. "You mean the legacy you just announced, the one you were building?" I glanced over at Bianca. She had stopped sobbing and was just watching me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "You mean the Vance Harrington legacy?" I asked my father. "The one you were trying to buy from a family of con men, or are you talking about the other legacy? The one you announced just 10 minutes ago?" I looked my father dead in the eye. "Are you talking about the legacy that you explicitly told 200 people I was not a part of?" He flinched. The word hit him like a physical slap. "Are you talking about the family?" I continued, my voice gaining strength. "That my own mother said I was not worthy to sit at the table with the family that my sister—" I gestured to Bianca. "The queen of this wedding hid behind a marble pillar like a piece of trash." My mother gasped. "Chloe, that is not what we meant." "That is exactly what you meant," I said, cutting her off, my voice like steel. "You have meant it every single day for 30 years. And now, because your world is ending, because your alliance turned out to be a lie, you want me to fix it? You want me to use my connections. You want me to save the legacy that I was never allowed to touch." My father's face was turning purple. He was a man who was not used to being cornered, especially not by me. I am still your father, Chloe. I am commanding you to fix this." "Commanding me," I said. "You have no authority over me, Dad. You have no power over me. You gave that up tonight. You gave that up when you let Bianca destroy my future 10 years ago. You gave that up when you called my life's work playing with dusty books." He looked desperate. "Chloe, I will put you back in the will. I will make you a partner at Vance Properties. Anything, just tell this man," he gestured wildly at Malcolm, "to stop this. You are smart. You are a lawyer or something. Fix this." I looked at him. This giant of a man who had dominated my entire life, now reduced to begging and bribing, and I felt nothing, just an empty, profound pity. I shook my head slowly. "I cannot help you, Dad." "Why not?" he pleaded. I gave him a small, sad smile. "Because I am not a lawyer. I am not a financial strategist. I am not a partner. You said it yourself." I turned to look at my sister Bianca, who was watching me with dawning horror, finally understanding. "I cannot fix your multi-million-dollar business alliance," I said. "I am just Chloe, the other one, the one who does not matter." I met my father's eyes one last time. "I am just the girl who plays with old books." My refusal hung in the air, cold and absolute. My father, James, looked as if I had physically struck him. He staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief. My mother, Denise, just sobbed her hand over her mouth. "Chloe, no, you cannot." But it was Bianca who finally moved. The spell of her frozen shock was broken, replaced by a volcanic, terrifying rage. Her grief for her lost marriage, her lost future, her lost status, needed a target. And it was no longer the pathetic, sweaty Spencer. It was me. "You!" she shrieked. The word was so loud, so full of venom that several guests in the back actually recoiled. She shoved past my stunned parents, her beautiful, expensive Vera Wang dress catching and ripping on a chair with a loud, tearing sound. She did not even notice. Her eyes were locked on me, and they were no longer the eyes of a bride. They were the eyes of an animal. "You did this!" She hissed, her voice low and shaking, all pretense of the weeping victim gone. She was pointing her finger right at my face, her hand trembling. "This was you. You planned all of this, did not you?" I just looked at her, my hand still held by Malcolm. His grip was a steady, warm presence. "You planned it!" Bianca screamed again, taking another step toward me. "You sat there behind that filthy pillar. You sat there in your cheap, ugly dress, and you planned this. You brought him here." She gestured wildly at Malcolm. "You brought this man here to destroy my life." "Bianca," my father started. "Calm down." "No!" She wheeled on him. "Do you not see what she did? She hates me. She has always hated me because I am the pretty one. I am the popular one. I am the one you loved." She turned back to me, her face a contorted mask of rage and makeup. "You have been jealous of me your entire life. Jealous because I got the friends. Jealous because I got the clothes. Jealous because I got the penthouse. Jealous because I was the one who was marrying into the Harrington family. And you, what do you have?" She laughed, a high, unhinged sound that echoed in the silent room. "You have nothing. You have a hobby. You have a tiny, sad apartment. You have no one. You have always been the failure, the pathetic, boring little failure, and you could not stand it. You could not stand to see me happy. You could not stand to see me win." This was it. This was the core of our relationship. This was the narrative my family had clung to for 30 years. I was the jealous one. She was the star. All my pain, all my humiliation was just jealousy. It was the only way they could justify their own cruelty. It was the only way she could live with herself. "You are a vindictive, evil snake." Bianca spat, her words now a low, fast torrent. "You were always like this, hiding in your room with your stupid, dusty books, looking down on me, judging all of us, because we were not smart like you. Well, look at you now. You could not even graduate on time. You could not even keep a man." She was referencing my old college boyfriend, the one she had accidentally slept with right before my midterms. "So you had to find some sugar daddy," she sneered, looking Malcolm up and down with pure contempt, "to come here and fight your battles for you. You think this makes you powerful. You think this makes you better than me. You are nothing. You will always be nothing but my sad, pathetic, jealous little sister." She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She had poured every ounce of her fear and rage into this final, desperate attack. She had laid her entire narrative bare for everyone to see. She had given me the final opening, the one I had been waiting 10 years to take. Bianca's shriek still seemed to hang in the air, a high, thin sound of pure venom. You failure! You pathetic, jealous failure!" I just looked at her. Her face was red and splotchy beneath the expensive wedding makeup. Her chest was heaving. She was the one who looked like a failure. A beautiful, perfectly dressed, wealthy failure. I let the silence stretch. I watched my father fidget, unable to meet my eyes. I watched my mother look desperately at the guests, as if begging them to intervene to make the bad, ugly scene just go away. I watched Spencer, who had not said a word, just staring at the floor, his world in ashes. Finally, I spoke. My voice was not a whisper anymore. It was clear, it was calm, and it was cold. "Failure," I said, looking right at Bianca. "You want to talk about failure, Bianca? You want to tell everyone here tonight what failure really means to our family? You want to tell them why I failed?" Bianca's eyes wavered just for a second. A flicker of, was it fear? Yes. She knew what I was talking about. I had never, not once in 10 years, brought it up. It was the one weapon I had, the one truth so ugly even my family could not spin it, and I had never used it. Until now. I I have no idea what you are talking about, she stammered, but the conviction was gone. Don't you? I said, letting go of Malcolm's hand and taking one small step toward her. Let me refresh your memory, sister. Let us talk about 10 years ago. I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore at Georgia State. I was not just a history major, I was a double major. History and computer science. I saw my father flinch. He hated my computer science degree. He had called it a useless, nerdy fantasy. I was not just playing with dusty books, I said, my voice rising just enough to carry. I was building something. I was in an advanced seminar. And I wrote a piece of code, an algorithm, a preliminary, raw, brilliant piece of code. It was designed to do what no one else was doing. It was designed to find ghosts, to scan unsearchable, digitized historical texts, old diaries, census records, ship manifests, and find patterns, to find connections, to build families. It was the seed, the very first seed, of what you now know as the Vanguard Archive. Malcolm was watching me, his expression unreadable. He knew I had built the archive, but I had never told even him this part. I was so proud of it. I whispered, the memory still sharp, still painful. I had never been proud of anything before. Not really. Not in a way that mattered. And I was stupid. I was naive. I still believed, after 20 years of evidence to the contrary, that my big sister might actually be happy for me. Bianca was shaking her head. No. Stop. This is not. I showed you, I said, my voice hardening. I brought you to my dorm. I pulled it up on my old slow computer. I showed you how it could find a name in a 1910 census and connect it to a sharecropper's diary from 1880 in another state. I showed you the magic. I was so excited. I told you a professor thought it was revolutionary. And you looked at it. I remember your face. You were not impressed. You were not happy for me. You just asked, that is, nice, Chloe. Is it worth anything? Bianca was pale. I do not remember this. Oh, I do, I said. I remember every second. Because a week later you came to my dorm when I was in class. You knew my password. It was family, ironically enough. You copied the entire project file, my code, my research, my future, and you gave it to your boyfriend. The room was so quiet I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. You remember Derek, don't you, Bianca? The tech bro you were dating from Georgia Tech? The one who worked at that mid-level software company downtown? You gave him my algorithm. You gave it to him. And you repackaged it, stripped my name, my notes, my soul from it, and you sold it to his company as an internal innovation project. That is a lie, Bianca shrieked. I never. You got a $10,000 bonus, Bianca, I said flatly. And you used it as a down payment on your first white Audi A4, the one you drove around Emory acting like you were the queen of the MBA program. You bought a car. With my life. No, my mother whispered, her hand at her throat. Bianca, you did not. Oh, she did, I said, turning my gaze to my parents. She did. And you know how I found out 6 weeks later. I was called into the dean's office. I was being put on academic probation. I was being accused of plagiarism. My own university was accusing me of stealing my own work, because Derek's company had filed a preliminary patent on it. They had made my code public, and my professors, the ones who had praised me, they thought I was the thief. This was the part no one knew, not even Malcolm. I almost lost my scholarship, I said, my voice finally breaking. I almost got expelled. I was 20 years old, and my entire world, everything I had worked for, was gone, because my sister wanted a car. That Bianca, That is failure. That is what throwing your life away really looks like. Bianca was sobbing now, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. It was not like that. It was just a stupid class project. I did not know he would use it. It was not my fault. And do you know what happened when I went home? I asked the room. I turned my eyes to my father. Do you know what he said when I went to him hysterical, holding the probation letter, holding the company's press release proving they had stolen my work? I looked at my father, James. He would not meet my eyes. He told me, "Stop this. You are making a scene." He told me, "This is a business lesson, Chloe. You do not show your ideas to people without a patent." He told me, "You were careless. They were just smarter than you. That is how the world works." He did not get mad at her. He got mad at me, for being stupid enough to get caught, for being weak enough to be stolen from. I turned to my mother. "And you? You told me to be quiet. You said, 'Do not be so dramatic, Chloe. You are embarrassing your sister.' You said, 'Bianca did not mean to hurt you.' You were the one who called the dean, not to defend me, but to ask him to make this go away quietly, so it would not embarrass the family, so it would not hurt Bianca's MBA application." I looked at them. My father, my mother, my sister, the holy trinity of my destruction. "You did not just let her steal from me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You covered for her. You conspired with her. You blamed me. You took my future, you sold it for a car, and then you called me the failure. You called me the difficult one. You called me disloyal. You did not just break my heart. You broke my life." "So, yes, Bianca," I said, my voice hard again. "I am jealous. You are right. I am so jealous. Because you get to be a thief. You get to be a liar. You get to be cruel. And they call you a star. And I just had to be the one to survive." The room was silent. I was breathing hard, the 30,000-word confession torn from my lungs, and in the silence, Malcolm, who had stood by my side unmoving, finally spoke. The silence in the room was absolute. My confession, the truth of 10 years, hung in the air like smoke. Bianca was still staring at me, her face pale, her mouth slightly open, the word liar stillborn on her lips. My father, James, was looking at the floor, his entire body rigid. My mother, Denise, just shook her head, a repetitive denying motion, as if she could erase my words by simple physical rejection. She was not denying what happened. She was denying that I had the right to say it. And in that terrible, suffocating silence, Malcolm, who had stood unmoving beside me, finally spoke. His voice was not loud. It was soft. It was devastating. "She is not lying," he said. My parents and Bianca flinched, as if they had forgotten he was there. They had been so focused on my outburst that they had forgotten the $10 million man standing next to me. Malcolm turned his head slightly, addressing the room, but his words were clearly aimed at my family. "As I mentioned," he said, his voice as smooth and cold as marble, "my foundation's due diligence is extensive. We do not invest $10 million based on a hunch. We investigate everything." He looked at my father. "When we first analyzed Miss Vance's platform, our tech team was astounded by the elegance of her code. But we also do a background check on our founders. We saw her academic record. We saw the scholastic probation filing from her sophomore year. We saw the official accusation of plagiarism. And we saw that the charge was quietly dropped 6 months later by the university, citing lack of evidence." Bianca made a small, choking sound. "We found that odd," Malcolm continued, "for a mind as brilliant as hers. So we dug deeper. We are, after all, a foundation dedicated to history. We enjoy digging." He looked right at Bianca. Her entire body was trembling. "We found the original patent filing from that software company. Derek Smith, I believe his name was. We cross-referenced the code in that patent with the fragments of Miss Vance's early work, which she had fortunately backed up on a now ancient server. The code was identical, a direct, artless copy and paste theft. Bianca flinched as if he had struck her. And then, Malcolm said, his voice dropping even lower, our forensic accounting team, who are very, very good at what they do, they traced the payout. They found the $10,000 consulting fee paid by that company to Derek Smith. And they found the wire transfer for exactly $10,000 made 2 days later. Not to Bianca Vance. That would have been too obvious. It was wired to a new short-term bank account, an account opened by Denise Vance. My head snapped toward my mother. She knew. She knew. She had not just covered for Bianca. She had helped her. She had hidden the money. My mother's face was ashen. That was for her car, she stammered. It was a gift. A gift, Malcolm repeated. A $10,000 gift paid for by the theft of your other daughter's entire academic future. You did not just cover for her, Mrs. Vance. You were an accessory. The room was silent. The politician was staring. Spencer's father was staring. Everyone was staring. My family was not just cruel, they were criminals. I finally turned to Bianca. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. You thought you broke me, I said, my voice shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking with a strange, terrible power. And you did. For a while. I dropped out of college. I was depressed. I lost my scholarship. I lost my friends. I lost myself. I was a failure, just like you always wanted. I had nothing. I was exactly the person you described. I took a step closer to her. But then, I started over. From scratch. From the ashes of what you stole from me. While you were driving your new Audi and getting your MBA, I was working 2 jobs. I was waitressing at night, and I was working at the university archive during the day for minimum wage. And every night from midnight until 3 in the morning, I was rebuilding. I could feel Malcolm's presence beside me, a solid wall of support. I rebuilt that algorithm, Bianca, but this time I did not just rebuild it. I made it better. I spent 10 years of my life, 10 years, working at my dusty old book job by day and coding by night. I taught myself 3 new languages. I learned about machine learning. I made the code smarter, faster, more secure. I built in protocols and analytical models that you and Derek Smith could not even comprehend. I looked around the room at all the stunned, silent faces. The Vanguard Archive. It is not just a collection of documents. It is a piece of technology built on pain. It was built from the very thing you tried to destroy. You called me a failure. You called me jealous. I gave her a small, terrible smile. But my failure, was the seed of my success. A success you will never ever understand. Because you do not build things, Bianca. You only know how to take them. The silence stretched, and then Malcolm delivered the final crushing blow. And that algorithm, he said, his voice ringing with absolute finality. That new algorithm, the one Chloe built from the ashes. That is the intellectual property the National Heritage Foundation and our partners have invested in. That is the $80 million asset. Not the simple, crude idea you stole 10 years ago, but the character, the genius, and the resilience of the woman who rebuilt it 10 times stronger. The room was a tomb. The only sound was Bianca's ragged, choking sobs. She had crumpled onto the floor, her $10,000 Vera Wang dress pooling around her like a shroud. She was no longer screaming. She was just broken. My father, James, was leaning heavily on the table, his knuckles white. My mother Denise was frozen, her hand still at her throat, her eyes wide with the horrifying realization of her own complicity. She had not just hidden the money for a car, she had been an accessory to a crime that had nearly destroyed her daughter. All the guests, all 200 of them, were silent. They were no longer guests at a wedding. They were witnesses at an execution. I looked at Bianca, this woman who had tormented me, this sister who had stolen from me, and I felt nothing, just a vast, empty coldness. My entire life I had wanted her to see me. And now she finally did. She saw the person she had created, a person who had learned to be harder, smarter, and more resilient than she could ever be. Malcolm, who had stood beside me, a silent, powerful anchor through my entire confession, finally moved. He did not look at me. He did not look at my family. He simply raised his chin, a small, almost invisible signal toward the back of the ballroom. As if summoned, two men stepped out of the shadows near the entrance. They had not been there a moment before. They were not waiters. They were not guests. They were in dark, impeccably tailored business suits. They looked like Secret Service. They moved with a silent, synchronized purpose that was terrifying. They carried sleek, dark leather briefcases. They did not look at the bride. They did not look at the guests. They walked, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor in a direct, unwavering line. They were walking straight toward my father. My father James saw them coming. He straightened up, his instincts as a businessman kicking in. He saw a threat. He tried to puff out his chest to regain his authority. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "I am calling hotel security. This is a private—" The first man, the taller of the two, did not stop. He walked right up to my father and placed his leather briefcase on table 1, right in the middle of the peonies and champagne glasses. He flipped the latches open. It was not a bomb. It was a stack of documents. Thick, legal, bound in blue. "Mr. James Vance," the man said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. "Yes, what is this?" my father blustered. The man slid the top document across the table. "This," he said, "is a legal order to cease and desist. It is from the National Heritage Foundation and its investment partners. It is effective immediately." My father stared at the document, his eyes scanning the first page, his face growing even paler. "Cease and desist. What, I have no business with you." Malcolm finally spoke again. His voice was calm. It was the voice of a man explaining a simple, unchangeable fact. "You do now, Mr. Vance. You announced your alliance with Harrington Capital tonight. Your intention to merge your assets to use Vance Properties to, as you put it, secure a new legacy." "It is a private merger," my father insisted. "Not anymore," Malcolm said. "You see, when my foundation was vetting the Harringtons, we discovered what the public records showed, that they are bankrupt." He took a step closer. "But our private investigation, the one we conduct to protect our $80 million investment in Miss Vance, found something much, much worse. Something you, in your desperate need for their old money validation, clearly failed to see." Spencer Harrington, the groom, made a small sound like a dying animal. "Harrington Capital," Malcolm said, "is not just bankrupt Mr. Vance. It is under active federal investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Labor for systematic pension fraud." A new wave of gasps rippled through the room. The politician my father had been trying to impress looked physically ill. "They did not just lose their money," Malcolm continued, his voice a cold, steady drumbeat. "They stole it. They leveraged their employees' 401k funds. They misappropriated retirement accounts. They have stolen millions of dollars from working-class people. The entire Harrington legacy is a Ponzi scheme." My father was shaking his head, his eyes wide with terror. I did not know. I had no idea." "We know you did not," Malcolm said, "which is why we are here. This cease and desist order legally notifies you that any attempt to merge your company, Vance Properties, with a known federally investigated fraudulent entity will no longer be seen as a bad business deal. It will be seen as an active, willful conspiracy to launder stolen money." My father collapsed. He did not faint. He just crumpled. His legs gave out and he hit the floor, landing in a heap at the foot of Bianca's chair. My mother screamed a short, sharp sound and dropped to her knees beside him. "James, James!" Malcolm did not even look down at my father. His gaze shifted, moving from the collapsed form of my father to the groom. "As for you, Mr. Harrington," Malcolm said. Spencer was trying to stand up. He was trying to slip away in the chaos. The second lawyer, who had been silent, simply stepped behind his chair, blocking his exit. "You are not just a con man," Malcolm said, walking slowly toward him. "You are not just a liar who marries for money. You are a thief." I had nothing to do with that." Spencer stammered, his old money accent gone, replaced by the terrified whine of a cornered man. "That was my father's division." "Was it?" Malcolm said. "Because our investigators traced the wire transfers. We saw the accounts you set up in the Cayman Islands. We saw the consulting fees you were paying yourself from your employees' retirement funds." Malcolm stopped right in front of Spencer, looming over him. "I called a friend of mine this afternoon," Malcolm said, his voice almost conversational. "He is the assistant director at the FBI's Atlanta field office. He was fascinated by my findings. He was particularly fascinated to learn that a primary target in his ongoing racketeering investigation was about to merge his fraudulent accounts with a clean, profitable Atlanta real estate firm." Malcolm leaned down so his face was just inches from Spencer's. "He asked me to tell you that he and his team will be waiting for you when you return from your honeymoon. But I have a feeling you will not be going." Bianca's scream ripped through the silence of the dining room. It was no longer the calculated cry of a spoiled princess. It was the raw, animalistic howl of someone watching her entire world burn to the ground. "But the wedding!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. Her perfectly manicured hands, the ones that had dismissed me just an hour ago, were now grabbing at her hair, mussing the expensive updo. "The merger, the house in the Hamptons, what about the money? Dad's money?" Her eyes, wild and bloodshot, darted from Malcolm Kincaid, my lawyer, to my father James, and finally they settled on me. The hatred in them was pure. "What about my money?" I let the question hang in the air, a sour note in the symphony of their ruin. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the one who had everything handed to her, who had laughed as I was cut from the will, who had planned to build her future on the bones of our family's reputation. "There is no merger, Bianca," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through her hysteria like a surgeon's scalpel. "There is no money. As Mr. Kincaid just explained, Vance Properties is insolvent. It's bankrupt." "No," she whimpered, shaking her head in violent denial. "No, Dad, tell her she's lying. Tell her." James, who had been frozen since Malcolm's initial revelation, finally collapsed into his heavy oak chair. He looked small, shrunken, a ghost in the expensive suit that now seemed to hang off him. "It's true, Bianca. Everything. It's all gone." "This is your fault," Bianca screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You planned this. You came here to destroy us." Malcolm Kincaid adjusted his tie, his expression bored. "Actually, Miss Vance, your father did this. For the last 5 years, he has been taking unsecured high-interest loans from the Harrington Group, using company assets as collateral for projects that never materialized. He was, in legal terms, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And Paul," Malcolm nodded toward the door, "is about to call in the debt." The mention of the Harringtons, her fiancé's family, made Bianca pause. "They wouldn't. We're family now." "The alliance." "An alliance," I interrupted, "that you, Dad, were funding with fraudulent reports. You weren't just borrowing from the Harringtons, you were colluding with them. You were helping their CFO cook the books for his own side deals, and in exchange he approved your loans. You tied your entire company to their criminal enterprise." James looked up, his face ashen. They said it was just creative accounting." "It's called conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Mr. Vance," Malcolm said flatly. And your alliance was contingent on Bianca marrying their son, sealing the deal, burying the shared secrets. But the Harringtons are being investigated by the SEC. Their CFO was arrested 3 days ago. Your alliance is worthless. James's breath hitched. They're being investigated. Which means they're looking for a scapegoat, I finished for him. And the man who's been signing off on their fraudulent loan agreements looks like the perfect candidate. They aren't just calling in the debt, Dad. They're going to hand you to the district attorney on a silver platter to save themselves. Prison. Bianca breathed the word. It hung in the opulent dining room, ugly and out of place. Dad, you can't go to prison. You can't. James finally looked at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pathetic terror I had never seen in him. Chloe, please, you have to help us. You're my daughter. Your family. Am I? I asked softly. The room was so quiet I could hear the crystal glasses vibrating from Bianca's quiet sobs. An hour ago, I was a line item to be deleted from your legacy. An hour ago, you sat there while Bianca and your wife auctioned off my mother's belongings to pay for a wedding that was nothing more than a cover-up for your crimes. I let the silence stretch thick and suffocating. I watched my father, the titan of industry, the man who called me his greatest disappointment, visibly break. I turned my gaze to my sister, her face a mask of ruined makeup. I let them sit in the ruin they had built. Then I walked to the head of the table, to the chair that had once been my mother's. Dad, I said. His head snapped up, his eyes wild with a desperate dying hope. I have a proposal. James leaned forward, half rising from his chair. Anything. I'll give you anything. The company, the house, just fix this. I know, I said, because you have nothing left to give. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment my entire life had been leading toward. I will buy Vance Properties from you. Bianca choked on a sob. Buy it. We're bankrupt. It's worthless. Exactly, I said. I'll buy this company and all of its associated debts, legal entanglements, and criminal liabilities for the sum of $1. The stunned silence in the room was absolute. Even Malcolm raised an eyebrow. James just stared at me. You want to buy the company. I want to buy your debt, I corrected him sharply. I want to buy the toxic assets, the fraudulent loans, the Harrington partnership, and the impending SEC investigation. I want to buy the whole mess for $1. Why? James whispered. To watch us suffer. To finally destroy me. No, I said, my voice resonating with a power that filled the room. To fix it. Something you were never capable of doing. I placed a $1 coin on the polished mahogany table. It spun for a second before settling. Here are the terms. You accept my offer. You sign over 100% of Vance Properties to my holding company effective immediately. My team, the little startup you found so amusing, will assume all outstanding liabilities. I nodded to Malcolm. Mr. Kincaid has already opened a channel with the Harringtons' legal team. We have leverage they don't know about yet. We have evidence of their fraud that goes far beyond your involvement, Dad. We will use that leverage to force them to restructure the debt, and in doing so, we will secure your testimony against them in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Immunity, James breathed. You will not go to prison, I declared. I won't let the Harrington family drag your name through the mud, not because you don't deserve it, but because it was my mother's name first, and I will not have it associated with a federal indictment. He let out a shaky breath, the relief so profound his entire body sagged. But, I said, and his eyes snapped back to mine, fear returning instantly. The company is mine. You will no longer be CEO. You will no longer be on the board. You will, starting Monday, have a new title, special advisor to the new CEO. You will have an office in the basement, and you will report directly to me. You can't do this, Bianca finally found her voice rising from her chair. This is our company, our legacy. Your legacy? I said, turning to her, was built on sand. Your wedding, your alliance, was a business transaction to cover his. I nodded at James. Financial crimes. It's over, Bianca. The wedding is off. The Harringtons already know. Malcolm made sure their lawyers received our evidence an hour ago. They're not just calling off the wedding, they're probably filing a restraining order against you as we speak. Bianca looked at James, her face crumpling in horrified realization. Dad? Is that true? Did you sell me? James couldn't meet her eyes. It was a merger. To save us. To save you, I said. And you were willing to sacrifice your children to do it. I looked at Bianca, were a commodity, and I looked at James, was disposable. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the shocked faces of my extended family, my weeping sister, and my broken father. You wanted to teach me about legacy, Dad. Well, here is your first lesson. A legacy isn't about the name on the building or the car you drive. It's not about expensive parties or strategic marriages that cover up your failures. I tapped the $1 coin on the table. A true legacy is built on integrity, on honesty, on creating value instead of just appearing to. It's something this family has not understood for a very long time. I looked at James, his face a ruin of sweat and fear. Starting Monday, your real education begins. You are going to learn how to build something real. You are going to learn how to work for an honest living. You are going to work for me. And you will show up every day on time. And you will teach my team everything you know about the properties you mismanaged so that we can salvage them. And Bianca, I said, turning to my sister who was staring at the wreck of her future. The allowance from the family company is of course terminated. I suggest you check the return policy on that wedding dress. You're going to need the money, and maybe for the first time in your life you can get a job. I pushed the dollar coin toward my father. Do we have a deal, Dad? Or does Malcolm call the district attorney and tell them you're rejecting our offer of cooperation? James looked at the coin. He looked at the prison sentence he was facing. He looked at the daughter he had disowned, the daughter who was now his only salvation. Slowly, painfully, his hand reached out and his fingers closed around the dollar. Yes, Chloe, he whispered, his voice broken. We have a deal. The moment James's fingers closed around the dollar coin, the heavy oak doors of the dining room burst open. It was not the hotel staff. Two large men in dark suits, the kind that speak of expensive private security rather than hotel hospitality, stepped inside. They were followed by Malcolm Kincaid, who looked entirely unfazed. Spencer Harrington, who had been sitting pale and silent beside Bianca, jumped to his feet. His father, Arthur Harrington, rose with him, his face purple with rage. What is the meaning of this? Arthur demanded, his voice accustomed to being obeyed. Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are, Mr. Harrington, Malcolm said smoothly. He nodded to the security men. That's him. And that one is his son, Spencer. The security men moved with a silent, practiced efficiency, flanking both Harringtons. Take your hands off me, Spencer snarled, trying to shove one of the men. It was like shoving a granite wall. The man didn't even blink. Mr. Harrington, Mr. Spencer Harrington, Malcolm announced, his voice carrying across the silent, terrified room. You are being detained by hotel security on suspicion of conspiracy to defraud a fellow guest, namely, Mr. James Vance. That is absurd, Arthur bellowed. This is slander. I will have your job. I will buy this hotel and fire every single one of you. I doubt you'll be buying anything soon, I said from the head of the table. I hadn't moved. Not with your assets frozen by the SEC. The blood drained from Arthur Harrington's face. He turned his furious gaze on me. You did this. You did this to yourselves, Malcolm corrected him. Mr. Vance here, he gestured to my father, has provided federal investigators with a full accounting of your shared creative projects. In exchange for his testimony, he has been granted immunity. You, however, have not. The word immunity hung in the air. Spencer looked at James with pure venom. "You old fool, you ratted us out to save yourself." James flinched but said nothing. He stared at his empty plate. "This is not a legal arrest, gentlemen," Malcolm continued, enjoying the moment. "This is a civil detention. We are simply ensuring you remain on the premises until the federal agents who are currently waiting in the lobby arrive to ask you some questions of their own." Panic, real and unfiltered, finally broke through Spencer's arrogance. His eyes darted toward the exit. The security men moved, slightly blocking his path. He was trapped. Bianca, who had been watching this exchange like a tennis match, finally understood. The money was gone. The alliance was a lie. Her future was evaporating. "Spencer!" she cried out, stumbling from her chair. The voluminous layers of her Vera Wang gown tangled around her ankles, but she pushed forward, desperation making her clumsy. "Spencer, darling, fix this. Tell them it's a mistake. Tell them who we are." She reached for him, grabbing the sleeve of his expensive tuxedo jacket. "Spencer, do something." Spencer looked down at her hand on his arm as if it were a spider. He looked at her tear-streaked face, her ruined makeup, her pathetic, desperate eyes. This was not the powerful heiress he had agreed to marry. This was the daughter of a bankrupt cooperating witness. She was worthless. "Get off me!" he spat. "No, please!" she begged, clinging tighter. "We can fix this. My father, Chloe, we can. You," he snarled, "are useless." With a violent shove, he threw her arm off him. The force sent Bianca stumbling backward. She tripped on the hem of her own extravagant dress and crashed to the floor. A full glass of red wine from the table overturned as she fell, splashing across the white silk skirt, staining it a deep, ugly crimson. Bianca just sat there on the floor, a stunned, broken doll in a ruined dress. The wine pooled around her, soaking into the pristine Vera Wang silk. "Get off me!" Spencer repeated, his voice filled with disgust. "You're as useless as your entire bankrupt family." He adjusted his jacket, turning his back on her completely. "Get this over with," he said to the security guards. The room was deathly quiet. The extended family, the aunts and uncles who had been whispering moments before, were now frozen in shock. They stared at Bianca, weeping on the floor. They stared at me, standing untouched at the head of the table. James made a move, a small aborted gesture toward his favorite daughter, but he stopped. He too was frozen, caught between the daughter he had ruined and the daughter who now owned him. "Wait," Bianca whispered from the floor. "Spencer, you can't. I love you." Spencer didn't even look back as the security guards placed firm hands on his and his father's arms. "Let's go," one of the guards said, his voice flat. Arthur Harrington walked with a semblance of dignity, his head held high, his face a mask of stone. But Spencer, the handsome prince, looked panicked. He tried to pull away one last time. "You can't do this." "My lawyers will." "Your lawyers have already been contacted," Malcolm said, checking his watch, "and I suspect they are currently advising you to remain silent." The security men guided them firmly toward the doors. The click of the doors closing echoed in the vast rooms, sealing their fate. The silence that followed was broken only by Bianca's ragged, choking sobs. She didn't try to get up. She just stayed on the floor, surrounded by stained silk and shattered glass. Her perfect life, her perfect wedding, her perfect future, all of it gone in an instant. Every eye in the room turned to the two remaining figures at the table. James slumped in his chair, a broken man, and me standing tall at the head of the table, the $1 coins still sitting in front of me. I looked at my sister on the floor, her body shaking. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just an empty, cold finality. The reign of the Vances was over. My reign had just begun. 6 months. It feels like a lifetime. From the window of my new office on the 42nd floor, the Atlanta skyline looks different, cleaner. The air in this city is certainly lighter now that the Harrington family is no longer polluting it. I did not stay to watch the federal agents lead Arthur and Spencer Harrington out of the hotel lobby that night. I did not need to. The news trucks camped outside the hotel for the next 3 days told the story. The indictments came down swift and hard. It was not just fraud. That would have been too simple. It was a beautiful, complex tapestry of wire fraud, mail, fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. It turns out my father's creative accounting was just one small thread in a much larger, dirtier blanket the Harringtons had wrapped around half the city. Spencer Harrington, the Golden Boy, the Prince of Atlanta society, was charged with 9 federal counts. His father, Arthur, faced 12. The FBI investigation is still ongoing. They keep finding new cellars, new hidden rooms filled with financial rot. My testimony and my father's coerced cooperation was not just a match. It was a flamethrower aimed at a house soaked in gasoline. And then there was Bianca, my sister. Her fall was quieter but in many ways far more brutal. She was not arrested by the FBI. She was convicted by the society she worshipped. Bankruptcy was the first step. With Vance Properties absorbed by my holding company and the Harrington Alliance revealed as a criminal enterprise, her river of money dried up overnight. The creditors who had patiently waited for the Harrington merger descended like vultures. The wedding gifts were seized before they were even unwrapped. The vendors who had been paid with fraudulent funds clawed back their deposits. She lost the penthouse, that glorious glass-walled monument to her own self-importance overlooking Piedmont Park. I saw the auction listing online. Motivated seller, it read. That was an understatement. All her designer clothes, her Art Deco furniture, her customized everything, sold, piece by piece to pay debts she did not even understand she had. But the money was the least of it. Bianca could have survived being poor. She could not, however, survive being irrelevant. The Atlanta elite, the Buckhead set that had formed the entirety of her universe, excommunicated her. She was no longer just the daughter of a failed businessman. She was the almost bride of a criminal, the sister of the woman who brought them all down. She was toxic. She was embarrassing. In her world, there is no greater sin. The charity gala invitations stopped. The front row seats at fashion shows vanished. The friends who had flocked to her engagement party suddenly could not recall her last name. Of course she tried to sue me. That was predictable. She filed a lawsuit for everything. Emotional distress, theft of her company, interference with her marital contract. It was a masterpiece of desperation. Malcolm, my lawyer, actually laughed when he read the filing. He said it was the most creative piece of fiction he had seen all year. It was dismissed naturally. The judge ruled she had no legal basis for any of her claims. She could not afford the court filing fees, let alone a real lawyer. She represented herself. It was, I am told, a performance for the ages, all tears and accusations. The judge was not impressed. I heard from Aunt Patricia, the only family member who still speaks to both of us, that Bianca now lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex out in Marietta. The kind of place with a shared laundry room and thin walls. She works, apparently. Some sort of entry-level assistant job at a dental office. The irony is, she is finally earning an honest living. I suspect she has never been more miserable. She tells anyone who will listen that I took everything from her, that I stole her life. She is wrong. I did not take anything from Bianca. I just stopped being the foundation that held up her fantasy. Her entire life was a house of cards built on pillars of lies. Her father's successful business, her fiancé's powerful family, her own flawless reputation. It was all hollow. It was all financed by fraud, deceit, and the dismissal of anyone who did not fit the narrative. She lost her penthouse, her fiancé, and her status, not because I took them away. She lost them because they were never really hers to begin with. They were props in a play, and I was simply the one who finally pulled back the curtain. My company, my success, my life. I built that on something real. I built it on integrity. I built it on the very code I wrote myself, on assets I earned, on a foundation of truth. When the storm came, my house stood. Hers was washed away. That is not revenge. That is just gravity. I did not look back. I heard Bianca's muffled, agonizing sob from the floor. I heard my father's sharp, terrified gasp for air as he stared at the dollar coin on the table. I heard the stunned silence of my aunts and uncles, the scraping of chairs as people unconsciously leaned away from the wreckage of our family. I felt Malcolm Kincaid's hand lightly on my back, a silent signal. It is done. We walked. We did not run. We walked out of that opulent dining room, past the hotel staff who were trying very hard to pretend they had heard nothing. We crossed the vast empty lobby, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. When the automatic glass doors slid open, the cool Atlanta night air hit my face. It felt like the first clean breath I had taken in 30 years. We did not speak as Malcolm's driver held the door to the black sedan. We did not speak as we pulled away from the curb, leaving the Grand Hotel behind us, a brightly lit mausoleum where my father had just buried his own legacy. The city lights blurred past the window. Red tail lights' green signals the bright white glow of skyscrapers. I watched them all, feeling strangely, profoundly numb. "Are you all right, Miss Vance?" Malcolm asked from the seat beside me. His voice was quiet, respectful. I turned from the window. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph. I had expected to feel ecstatic, victorious. I had just dismantled the two men who had tried to destroy me and broken the power of the family who had cast me out. But I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel rage. I did not feel happy. I felt light. "I think so," I whispered, surprised by the truth of my own answer. "I feel relieved." I had not realized how heavy it was, the weight I had been carrying for my entire life. It was the crushing burden of not enough, not smart enough, not ambitious enough, not ruthless enough, not the right kind of daughter. My whole life had been a reaction to them. My drive to succeed, my little startup that had grown into an empire, it was all fueled by a desperate childish need to one day walk back into that house and make them finally say, "We were wrong, you are worthy." But sitting here in the quiet dark of the car, I knew they would never have said it. Even if I had owned the world, James and Denise Vance would have found a way to criticize my management style. Bianca would have mocked the color I painted the sky. Tonight was not a victory. It was a release. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free. The 30-year loop of emotional abuse, of quiet dismissals, of being the family disappointment, of being the inconvenient emotional daughter who just did not understand the legacy. It was over. I had not just ended the conversation, I had finally permanently hung up the phone. I realized I was not crying. I had no tears left for them. My grief for the family I wanted, the family I should have had dried up years ago. What was left was just scar tissue, and tonight I had stopped picking at the wound. "They will not recover from this," Malcolm said as if reading my thoughts. "The Harringtons are finished, and your father, he is entirely in your hands." "He is," I agreed. The car moved silently through the night. I thought about my mother, Denise. She had sat there mute as her husband and daughter auctioned off the memory of her predecessor. My biological mother. Denise had been my father's greatest enabler. She was the one who enforced the family's social standing. She was the one who taught Bianca that cruelty was acceptable as long as it was polite. She was the one who dismissed my emotional outbursts while praising Bianca's spirit. Her silence tonight was her loudest confession. She had hitched her wagon to James Vance, and she was now chained to him as he fell. The silence in the car was comfortable. It was the sound of an ending. The ending of me. The ending of the girl who needed their approval. She died in that dining room tonight, and I. Chloe Vance, the CEO, the owner, the architect of my own life, was finally born. The weeks that followed were a quiet, methodical dismantling. As Malcolm predicted, the Harringtons were finished. The SEC investigation, bolstered by my father's terrified and thorough testimony, was devastating. Arthur and Spencer were indicted on multiple counts of fraud and racketeering. Their assets were frozen. Their empire, built on lies and intimidation, crumbled to dust. My family's downfall was less dramatic but just as complete. The bank, no longer placated by the promise of a Harrington merger, called in my father's massive unsecured loans. The Buckhead mansion, the grand symbol of the Vance legacy, the house my mother Denise had guarded like a fortress, went up for sale. It was not a dignified sale. It was a fire sale. A foreclosure auction on the courthouse steps. I heard from my Aunt Patricia that my mother did not even attend. She stayed inside packing 30 years of curated perfection into cardboard boxes while strangers bid on her life. They did not become homeless. I would not allow that. It would have been too easy for them, too merciful. No, I made sure they had a place to land. They moved into a small rented bungalow in a suburb 2 hours outside the city. A house with beige vinyl siding, a small patchy lawn, and a kitchen with laminate countertops. The kind of house my mother used to sneer at from the window of her Mercedes. Denise, the queen of Atlanta society, was now a ghost. Her charity boards quietly requested her resignation. Her friends, the wives of bankers and lawyers, stopped returning her calls. Her name was now linked to bankruptcy and crime. In her world, there was no recovering from that. She was no longer useful. And then there was my father. He took the deal. It was the dollar or federal prison. It was not a difficult choice for him. He signed the papers in Malcolm's office, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. He signed away his company, his title, his power. He signed away the last 30 years of his life, all for $1. My company, my little startup as he had called it, formally acquired Vance Properties. The first thing I did was change the name. It was no longer about him. It was about the future. My father's first day of work was a rainy Tuesday. I watched him from my new office, the CEO's office, the one that had been his, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He arrived at 8:55 a.m. He was not wearing his usual custom-tailored suit. He wore an off-the-rack department store suit that fit him badly. He looked gray, defeated, and utterly lost. The new COO I hired, a sharp woman named Maria, greeted him in the lobby. I watched on the security feed. There was no special treatment. He was just another employee. Maria escorted him to his new office. It was not on the top floor. It was in the basement next to the archives. It was small. It had no windows. It had a metal desk and a standard-issue computer. His new title was Special Advisor on Legacy Assets. His job, his only job, was to sit in that windowless room 8 hours a day and document every bad deal, every fraudulent loan, and every financial mistake he had made for the last 20 years. He was being paid minimum wage. He had to catalog his own failures page by page so that my team could identify what was salvageable and what needed to be cut loose. He was not rebuilding his legacy. He was providing the footnotes for its autopsy. This was the new order. He had wanted to teach me about legacy. He had wanted me to understand the weight of the Vance name. And I did. I understood it so well that I had to take it from him to clean it. He works for me now. He answers to my board. He will spend the rest of his professional life learning for the very first time what it actually means to build something honest. This is his new job, this is his penance, and this is my true inheritance. 1 year later. The building was not just new, it was revolutionary. Glass and steel and warm reclaimed Georgia wood rose from the heart of downtown Atlanta. Where an old, neglected warehouse had stood, an asset my father had dismissed as dead weight, there was now this. The Vanguard Archive. The name was Malcolm's idea. The Vanguard, the forefront, the new generation. The lobby was packed. Journalists, city officials, tech investors, and artists mingled under a soaring atrium. The air was electric, not with the strained, suffocating tension of my father's dinner parties, but with the genuine buzz of innovation. This was not a building designed to intimidate or impress with old money. It was designed to inspire. I had funded it through the Heritage Fund, the new name for my mother's trust. I had taken the assets she had ignored, the ones intended to be my pin money, and turned them into this, a non-profit foundation dedicated to funding women-led startups and preserving the work of overlooked artists. Today was the grand opening. I stood on a sleek minimalist stage. Beside me, holding my hand, was Malcolm Kincaid, my lawyer, my confidant, and as of 3 months ago, my husband. He had been the one constant, the one pillar of integrity in the storm. He looked at me, not with possession, but with a quiet, powerful pride. I looked out over the crowd. In the front row, I saw faces I recognized. The mayor, the head of the university's art department, the CEO of the tech firm that had been our first major partner. And in the third row, seated quietly between an art critic and a tech blogger, were James and Denise Vance, my father and his wife. They looked normal. The change was startling. My father wore a simple gray suit. It was not bespoke. It was not pinstriped. It was the suit of a man who buys his clothes at a department store. A man who punches a clock. His face, which I had only ever seen as hard and commanding, looked softer. Maybe just tired. He had, after all, just completed his one-year review in his basement office. His education, as I called it, was progressing. He had spent the last 12 months cataloging his own failures, documenting every bad deal and fraudulent report, so my team could undo the damage. It had been humbling. It had been, I suspect, agonizing. But he was still there. He had not quit. He had not broken. He was for the first time learning. Denise beside him was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the perfectly coiffed, armor-plated society wife. She wore a simple navy dress. Her hair was its natural silvery gray cut in a modest bob. She looked like a real person. She had found a job just as I had suggested to Bianca. She worked at the local library checking out books. Not for charity, for a paycheck. She told my Aunt Patricia that she enjoyed the quiet. She enjoyed being useful in a way that had nothing to do with a guest list or a seating chart. They had sold the mansion. They lived in the bungalow. They were, for all intents and purposes, exactly the kind of middle-class people they had spent their entire lives looking down on. When my father caught my eye, he did not look away in shame. He simply nodded. A small, respectful acknowledgement. And then he did something I had never seen him do. He started to clap. It was a slow, quiet applause, just for me, before the speeches even began. Denise joined him. It was not the proud performative clap of a father boasting about his child. It was the applause of an audience member, a spectator. They were finally watching my life instead of trying to write it. Malcolm squeezed my hand one last time before I stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was steady. It did not shake. "Welcome to the Vanguard Archive." A year ago, I was reminded by my family about the importance of legacy. I was told that legacy was something to be protected, something to be passed down, something defined by a name on a building or a seat at the head of a table. I paused, my eyes scanning the crowd, resting for just a moment on my father. I have come to learn that this is not true. A true legacy is not something you are given. It is not something you inherit or protect or hoard. A true legacy is something you build. It is built from the ground up with honesty and hard work. It is built not on what you own, but on what you create. It is built not by excluding others, but by investing in them. That is the mission of this archive. This foundation will not be a closed system rewarding only those who already have power. It will be a launch pad. We are not just preserving the past, we are funding the future. We are finding the innovators, the artists, the women who have been told their ideas are little projects, and we are giving them the resources to build their own legacies. We are providing the capital, the mentorship, and the network that they, like me, were denied. We are creating a new heritage, one of excellence, yes, but also of ethics. I looked at Malcolm, who smiled. This building is a testament to that idea. It is a place for truth, for transparency. The glass walls are not just an architectural feature. They are a promise. What we do here will be done in the light. I continued with my prepared remarks, thanking the architects, the board, the mayor. But as I spoke my internal monologue, the voice that had haunted me for 30 years was finally quiet. I thought back to that night, that awful final dinner. I thought about the decades I spent in that family. They had always tried to seat me at the end of the table in the back behind a pillar in the shadows. They thought that by hiding me they could diminish me. They thought that by making me the scapegoat, the failure, the other, they could solidify their own fragile identities. I smiled to myself, looking out at the bright, open, light-filled room I had built. They never understood. They thought they were punishing me. They thought they were making me invisible. But they were wrong. By trying to seat me behind that pillar, they were just giving me a perfect view. A perfect, unobstructed view of all their lies, of their secrets, of their weaknesses, of their empty, hollow performance. They gave me the one thing they never had, the truth. And now I am not hiding behind the pillar anymore. I am building the whole building. The ultimate lesson from this story is that legacy is not what you are given, it is what you build. Chloe was dismissed as a failure by a family obsessed with their hollow reputation. They tried to erase her, but while they were focused on appearances, Chloe focused on building something real. True power does not come from inheriting a name. It comes from having the integrity, intelligence, and courage to build your own. She did not just survive their abuse, she used their own failures as the foundation to create a new, honest legacy. Do you know someone who refused to be defined by their family? Share this story of ultimate vindication with them and tell us your thoughts below.